2000, the world has been hit with more than 1,700 earthquakes with magnitude greater than 5. Many happened around the Ring of Fire, located around the Pacific Ocean. In North America, the biggest threat is the San Andreas Fault Line, which can create an earthquake of a magnitude higher than any other, earning it the spine-tingling nickname, the Big One. The potential destruction of California is a terrifying prospect that could have unimaginable consequences. But the Big One is just the beginning of what's to come. Bad news! Scientists have predicted an earth-shattering event that will occur in 2030. Like it or not, there's a 70% chance that we'll experience the Big One, and it will be an earthquake with a magnitude of 6.7. The San Andreas Fault Line will cause the Big One, but what is scary is that we can't predict it. On the other hand, a massive earthquake occurs every 100 years. This means there's always time to prepare for a natural disaster. If we traveled back in time, we'd see a few significant earthquakes like the ones that wiped out San Francisco and Fort Tejon. Buildings made a long time ago are not quake-proof. They will collapse. Even if they survive, you should not enter them. But buildings are not the most dangerous part. You should watch out for electrical lines and gas pipes. Your hill house might be lovely, but it is extremely unsafe. During quakes, the hill can turn into a massive landslide that will destroy everything in its path. Say goodbye to road trips because all the roads will be ruined. You should have some spare water and food since you won't be able to go to the supermarket. This disaster won't be cheap. It will cost the U.S. around $200 billion to recover from the quake. At least the earthquake will not trigger tsunamis. But there's something it can cause more damage than the Big One. The notorious Cascadia subduction zones start in California and ends up all the way in Vancouver, Canada. The San Andreas Fault Line is nothing compared to this zone. It can wipe the whole coast off the face of the Earth, an example of hyperbole. Subduction zones are tectonic plates forced to be one under the other and constantly pulling apart. One is called the North American Plate and the other is the Juan de Fuca Plate. Zones like these are not to be messed with, since they are terrifying hotspots for earthquake activity and extremely dangerous because they cause massive underwater quakes. But they are underwater, so what can they do to us? Well, they can cause giant tsunamis, flooding cities, and destroying the coastline. Right now, the most active zone is the Ring of Fire. The Cascadia zone might be less active, but it is like a sleeping beast that can wake up and destroy everything in its path, causing a groundbreaking earthquake. The last time all this stress was released was in the year 1700. Unlike the San Andreas quake, this one will cause massive tsunamis and much bigger shocks. Let's hope you'll be camping in an open field at that time, because most buildings and bridges will likely be destroyed. Also, be ready for the aftershocks, as they'll be devastating. Nature won't be spared either. Landslides will change animals' habitats. Even our homes will be changed forever. Luckily, there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and scientists are doing everything they can to ensure our safety. New rules are implemented. Every new building must be able to withstand massive shocks. They're developing modern warning systems, and every new infrastructure must follow strict quake-proof guidelines. The Juan de Fuca and the North American plates are locked together, but they won't stay like that forever. When they unlock, get ready for a massive shake. The closer you are to the epicenter, the more damage you'll experience. But even if you are lucky to be far away, you may still feel the ground shaking for some time. Now, if we compare the Cascadia subduction zone and the San Andreas Fault, we'll see how much more dangerous the Cascadia zone is. In 1994, there was an enormous 6.7 magnitude earthquake in the Northridge area, close to the San Andreas Fault. Sadly, many people didn't make it, and some were injured. Back then, buildings were not strong and earthquake-proof, and many of them were damaged. The Cascadia subduction zone can potentially cause a magnitude 9 earthquake. A magnitude 6 quake has the power of around 44 million pounds of dynamite, but a magnitude 9 has the power of 44 trillion pounds of dynamite. The strongest ever recorded quake was in Chile. Its magnitude measured 9.5, and it destroyed most everything. So let's say you've survived the quake, but the struggle is far from over. Soon after, a massive tsunami will strike, with waves that might reach up to 100 feet in some areas. That's so unlike the San Andreas earthquake, which can't produce any significant waves. So say goodbye to your beautiful garden, since salt water will destroy trees and plants, changing the environment for a period of time. The only positive thing will be you won't need Halloween decorations, because all those dried out trees will resemble a ghost forest. The combination of waves, quakes, and the sheer size of the area will make this natural disaster much more dangerous than any caused by the San Andreas Fault or the so-called Big One. A quake similar to this happened around 300 years ago. Many more have been recorded in the past 3,500 years, proving that they continually occur every 400 to 600 years. So, technically, we have around 100 to 300 years before the next big one hits. We still have no idea how exactly the Cascadia subduction zone works, because we discovered it in 1970. This zone is super scary because it can cause big earthquakes. It was found by accident when researchers studied the Ring of Fire. They wanted to know if this area had caused any trouble in the past years, and the proof was under their noses. In Washington, there is a horror forest where nothing has been growing for years. When researchers tested the soil, they found a tremendous amount of salt. They put two and two together and concluded that a massive tsunami had been the reason. Experts still didn't know when the forest was destroyed. But Japan kept records of a gigantic earthquake that had a similar effect. It was the one that happened in the year 1700. There is a 1 in 3 chance that the next one will occur in 2050. You must know how to survive the Canadian earthquakes and make it out unscathed, so listen carefully. Those who live in this area have almost no experience with earthquakes like this one. Surviving the quake is relatively easy, but the tsunami coming afterwards is the real danger. After the shake, find the highest ground and go there. Only bring the essentials, like food and water. Yeah, leave your baseball card collection at home. After the first hit, don't try to go down. Seismologists say that most likely there will be a few more waves, and they have proven this. On the 22nd of May, 1960, seismologist Jerry Eston and his 4 friends went to Hawaii to see an expected tsunami that was to happen around midnight. They set up their gear on Wailuku Bridge with an escape route planned. This bridge had been destroyed in the previous tsunami, but the new one was much taller and better. After midnight, the water was 4 feet above the average level. The second wave hit a half hour after midnight, and the water rose another 9 feet by 1 a.m. The water started going down and dropped by 7 feet, but the horror was far from over. Next, they saw a wave that was around 20 feet tall. This shows us that tsunamis are unpredictable, and we should listen to experts to stay safe.
A magnitude 15 earthquake has the potential to completely destroy our planet and evaporate all the water in a matter of seconds, leaving Earth uninhabitable. Over 500,000 earthquakes happen annually, but none have a magnitude of 15. 90% of quakes occur in the terrifying Ring of Fire zone located around the Pacific Ocean. The ground there is like jello. It shakes almost constantly. The most powerful earthquake to have ever struck Earth had a magnitude of 9.5. That much power can lengthen or shorten the day. But there's probably an earthquake in the confines of your own home now caused by a speck of dust landing on a table. But it has a power of negative 15 magnitudes. Earthquakes happen when tectonic plates move. They're like Lego pieces that are not properly secured, and when they move up, down, or hit one another, the ground also moves, triggering earthquakes. This tectonic energy acts like a battery. It stores energy for a long time, up to 500 years. When this stored energy is released in a sudden burst, the consequences are horrifying. Even the strongest structures submit to this relentless force that leaves a trail of destruction in its path. In some instances, earthquakes can even trigger tsunamis, amplifying the chaos. Such a crazy amount of power can split the ground open and cause severe damage. The strength of an earthquake is measured by the Richter scale, but now it's being replaced by the moment magnitude scale. When there's an earthquake, we hear about how strong it is. It's usually from 1 to 10. Luckily, we haven't had a Richter scale earthquake yet. The most powerful earthquake to have ever happened in modern history occurred in Chile in the 60s. It was around 9.5 on the Richter scale, and it altered Earth's rotation and messed up the length of the day by around 2 milliseconds. It also triggered a massive tsunami and affected a vast area of 155,000 square miles. The Richter scale doesn't actually have a limit. Still, anything above 25 doesn't need measuring, because if that ever happened, we would simply turn into dust, and nobody would care to measure this disaster. As we said, the strongest earthquake had a magnitude of 9.5. If this magnitude had been just 0.5 stronger, it would have created a ruptured line 2,174 miles long. That is almost 7 times the size of Wyoming. A magnitude 11 earthquake would create a crack halfway around the world. Massive tsunamis would hit coastal areas, destroying everything, and Earth would get into a massive environmental crisis. If you love hiking, you would have new mountains to explore, created by the terrifying earthquake. Even the temperature would increase because of volcanic eruptions and the resulting greenhouse gases. It would turn our planet into a hot oven. The safest places would be far away from any buildings, seas, oceans, and mountains where there would be a low chance of a landslide. Countries unprepared for earthquakes would be totally destroyed, and cities would turn into piles of rubble and dust. Going up on the Richter scale would only make things worse. But don't worry, an earthquake of that power is impossible. Earth's crust doesn't have enough energy to produce such earthquakes. But there is something that has much more power and can produce mega earthquakes. Asteroids are powerful enough to destroy our planet, as we all know from the dinosaur era. That asteroid was around 6 miles long, and it caused massive damage to the planet. It triggered earthquakes that shook the ground constantly for months. These terrifying quakes were about 50,000 times stronger than the Chile earthquake. They also triggered a tsunami that was 30,000 times more powerful than the Indian Ocean tsunami. And the latter was one of the most devastating tsunamis to have ever struck Earth. The earthquakes caused by the asteroid had a magnitude of 11, making it the most powerful and scariest natural disaster ever. And let's hope it stays that way. The Indian Ocean tsunami affected only certain areas of the world. Meanwhile, the asteroid tsunami affected every part of the world and had 33-foot-tall waves. Even if you had traveled to the most remote place on Earth, you wouldn't have been able to hide from this Grim Reaper. A 15-magnitude earthquake wouldn't be 15% stronger than the Chile earthquake. The scale doesn't work like that. It would be around 100 million times more powerful than a 9.5 magnitude quake. It could make all the water on Earth evaporate, leaving us devastated and without any H2O to survive. All ecosystems would collapse, all food chains would be broken, and only some super strong bacteria would probably survive the impossible. That is only a fraction of the frightening things that could happen. The ocean is like the AC for our planet. Without it, Earth would be super hot. The ocean also serves as a shield from the sun's powerful rays. It acts as a heat absorber and cools Earth. Scientists think that the most dangerous thing would be the inability of Earth's crust to survive the violent shakes of the 15-magnitude earthquake. If our planet miraculously survived and didn't turn into dust, there would be massive openings in its crust. The ground would become gelatinous. It would randomly move up, down, left, and right, and no building would survive that. Our civilization would be brought back to the Stonehenge era. Tectonic movements like this are devastating. A similar thing happened in Japan when tectonic plates moved 165 feet from each other and then snapped back together, creating a 9-magnitude earthquake. No place on Earth is immune to this bone-chilling natural phenomenon. Still, certain places have higher chances of being destroyed than others, like the Ring of Fire, where 90% of earthquakes happen. This is a place where earthquakes are almost everyday occurrences. The Ring of Fire is located in the Pacific Ocean. It forms a ring around the continents that surround the Pacific. There, several tectonic plates meet, creating highly unstable ground. To make the problem much more terrifying, 75% of active volcanoes are located in this area. 90% of dormant volcanoes are also there, making this place extremely dangerous. Scientists carefully study this region to find a way to predict when the next earthquake might strike. The Ring of Fire is not the only place at risk of earthquakes. In California, along the San Andreas Fault line, two tectonic plates have been storing power for more than 200 years. The San Andreas Fault is 715 miles long and has the potential for a massive earthquake. This region has its fear of violent earthquakes like the one that happened in San Francisco in 1906. It had a magnitude of 7.8 on the Richter scale. Scientists' predictions are terrifying. They say that the chance of a 6.7 magnitude earthquake is very high in the area. If all hell starts to break loose, you should know how to survive. Avoid anything that might fall on you, like windows, closets, or unstable ceilings. The official phrase from emergency experts is drop, cover, and hold on. Stay low to the ground. Hide under something stable like a table, and remain there until the shaking stops. Make sure to stay in your shelter for another minute or two, just in case there are aftershocks or loose debris. Use your nose and smell for gas. If you do smell it, don't turn the lights on or do anything that might ignite it. Stay strong and be safe.
There is a powerful force hiding underground where tectonic plates meet, and one forces another under it. This happens in the Pacific and Indian Oceans. Strain builds over centuries. The tension is unbearable until the megathrust awakens. The Earth shakes with a magnitude that can exceed 9 points, more powerful than any other earthquake. When the seafloor suddenly gets pushed up fast, it sends a huge ripple across the water, and a tsunami of huge force is out. These waves are called teletsunamis, and they cross entire ocean basins, ready to take over coastlines thousands of miles away. The thrust fault stretches over 600 miles. The Earth is not just shaking, it feels like it's tearing apart. This is the power of a megathrust earthquake. Those caught in its path will have to fight for their lives. Japanese authorities recently had to issue their first ever megaquake advisory. It happened because of a strong tremor on the edge of the Nankai Trough ocean floor zone. In the end, most of the warnings were lifted, and there wasn't much damage from the 7.1 magnitude earthquake. Parts of southwestern Japan started to shake, and the superfast trains in Japan slowed down to stay safe, which made travel slower for everyone. But everyone is staying alert as they know about the risk of a megathrust earthquake that could happen within the next few decades in the Nankai Trough. The tectonic plate under the Philippine Sea is slowly sliding underneath the land where Japan is, moving just a few inches every year. The last big earthquakes from this area happened in 1944 and 1946, both with a magnitude of 8.1. These quakes have caused a lot of destruction in the country. The next megathrust earthquake in the region, if it does happen, could be between a magnitude 8 and 9. Scientists still can't agree on how likely this mega earthquake is to happen, but it could be up to 80% certainty. On the other side of the Pacific, scientists from the U.S. Geological Survey have studied a dangerous area along the U.S. West Coast. It's called the Cascadia subduction zone, and it stretches from northern California to northern Vancouver Island in Canada. Over the past 14,200 years, there have likely been at least 30 big earthquakes in this region. One major quake happens every 500 years on average. But for a long time now, Cascadia has been quiet, and it worries scientists. They think this might be because the area is locked, meaning the tectonic plates are stuck together and building up a lot of pressure. Eventually, the part of the seafloor could suddenly break and move by several feet. The shaking would be just 5 minutes, but it would create a powerful tsunami as the seafloor shifts that would last for 10 hours. If it happens, it's going to be the worst natural disaster in the country's history, according to experts. The ground on some inland hills could turn into something like quicksand. This would cause the hillsides to slide and crumble, taking down roads and bridges. Around 620,000 buildings could be badly damaged or even collapse, including about 100 hospitals and 2,000 schools. People in Washington state might have to take care of themselves without help for 2 weeks, finding food, water, and shelter on their own. Scientists are studying slow slip events, where the tectonic plates move very slowly over weeks or months, releasing some energy but not enough to stop a big one. Every time the magnitude of an earthquake goes up by just one number, the energy it releases is 40 times bigger. So we'd need about 1 million small earthquakes every day for 500 years straight to release the same energy as one huge magnitude 9 earthquake. But these small earthquakes might be clues that a bigger earthquake is coming. To better monitor the Cascadia Fault, experts are mapping the fault more accurately and adding better monitoring tools offshore. Scientists receive over $10 million to install seismic sensors and seafloor pressure gauges on a fiber optic cable off the coast of Oregon. The goal is to be ready to warn people and potentially save lives when a big earthquake strikes. A sharp megathrust earthquake happened in this part of the world in 1964. It went down in history as the Great Alaska Earthquake and had a magnitude of 9.2. It lasted for more than 4 minutes, making it the most powerful earthquake in the history of the U.S. and North America. The ground shook so hard that it caused huge cracks and landslides. In Anchorage, many houses, buildings, and roads were destroyed because they weren't built to handle such a big earthquake. In some places, the land was permanently changed. For example, the coastline near Kodiak and Hinchinbrook Island was lifted by 30 feet. In other areas, like Gerwood and Portage, the ground sank by 8 feet. They had to rebuild roads higher so they wouldn't be flooded by the time. A huge 27-foot tsunami wiped out the entire village of Chiniga. Many coastal towns were heavily damaged, not just by the earthquake, but also by tsunamis and the fires that followed. After the main earthquake, there were thousands of smaller aftershocks for months. A moderate earthquake of magnitude 4.4 shook Los Angeles in August 2024. Once it was over, the LA Fire Department checked around the city and didn't find any major damage or anyone hurt. In the nearby city of Pasadena, which is close to the earthquake's epicenter, a water pipe burst inside City Hall and everyone had to leave the building. Thankfully, there was no danger of a tsunami. The best we can do to avoid panic in such situations is to be prepared. Japan is one of the places on Earth where earthquakes happen the most because it sits on the edges of 4 tectonic plates. Around 1,500 of these earthquakes each year are noticeable. Because of this, the people in Japan have learned to live with earthquakes. The 1950 law set a rule that buildings should be able to handle earthquakes up to a magnitude 7 without falling apart. An update 30 years later said that buildings should only have minor damage in such earthquakes and still work as usual. But if an earthquake is even stronger, the law says the building's main job is to not collapse and save people's lives. At the most basic level, buildings are made stronger with thicker beams, pillars, and walls so they can handle shaking better. Another technique is placing special pads made from materials like rubber at the base of a building. Some buildings are even built on thick layers of padding that separate them from the ground completely, which helps protect them during an earthquake. A skyscraper might sway back and forth a lot, moving up to 5 feet. To stop it from getting damaged, engineers can add something called dampers every second floor all the way to the top. These dampers are like giant bicycle pumps, but instead of air, they're filled with liquid. When the building shakes, the dampers push against the liquid inside them. Even though the liquid doesn't squish very much, it can still absorb some of the shaking. When they're building tall skyscrapers, engineers try to make the structure as simple and balanced as possible. This means having each floor the same height and placing the support columns evenly. But sometimes, architects who design skyscrapers don't want to make these compromises because they have creative ideas for how the building should look. Then they have to find compromise solutions. For example, Tokyo's Skytree Tower, one of the tallest buildings in the world, is designed in a futuristic style but also includes special features to protect it from earthquakes. It has a central pillar, like in traditional Japanese pagodas, and seismic dampers that help absorb the energy from an earthquake, keeping the building safe.
An earthquake in Indonesia began in 1829 and lasted a mighty 32 years. It reached its climax in 1861 and hit a magnitude of around 8.5. It was caused by the tectonic plates below the island slowly clashing against each other. Researchers discovered that the quake had been building for some time after analyzing the coral in the area. They found it was being periodically exposed to the open air. That was caused by the gradual earthquake moving the land up and down. Scientists call these decades-long silent earthquakes slow slip events. A single lightning bolt can warm the air to around 54,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The heat makes the air expand quickly, creating a shock wave or boom, which we know to be thunder. There are close to 3 trillion trees on Earth. That translates to roughly around 422 trees for every person. Before humans, the number was nearer to 6 trillion. Almost 70% of the Earth's surface is covered by water, which on average is around 2.5 miles deep. 97% of Earth's volcanoes lie underwater, as well as the mid-ocean ridge, a massive mountain range that is over 40,000 miles long. Humans have mined around 190,000 tons of gold from the planet. Experts predict there is around 20% still left to be mined, but this figure is constantly changing. The world's largest active volcano is in Hawaii. Called Mauna Loa, it's over 2.5 miles above sea level. Given that most of it is underwater, the volcano's summit is a staggering 11 miles from its base. That's the same length as over 160 football fields. The highest ever recorded temperature on Earth was a sweltering 136 degrees Fahrenheit. It was recorded in El Azizia, or modern-day Libya, on September 13, 1922. The lowest temperature was a chilling minus 129 degrees Fahrenheit, recorded at Russia's Vostok station in 1983. Earth is the 5th largest planet in the solar system, behind Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. It has a circumference of roughly 25,000 miles, and it would take the average person around 8,300 hours to walk around the face of the Earth. The separation between Earth's land masses would make such a trek almost impossible, though. It takes 365.25 days for the Earth to orbit the Sun. Because our calendar years only have 365 days, we add an extra leap day every 4 years to make up for the difference. Russia is the largest country on the planet, with a total area of about 6.5 million square miles. It encompasses more than 1/8 of the Earth's inhabited land area, but still has a relatively small population given its size. Earth is the only planet with one moon. Mercury and Venus have no moons, while every other planet has 2 or more. Earth is over 4 billion years old. Scientists calculate this by looking at the planet's oldest rocks, as well as meteorites that have crash-landed. They used meteorites as they were formed at the same time as Earth, when the solar system was forming. The ground we walk on is basically recycled. The planet's rock cycle turns igneous rocks to sedimentary ones, then transforms those into metamorphic rocks, and back again. Like Earth, our moon also experiences earthquakes. They're less common and intense than the ones we have, and are caused by tidal stresses. A tidal stress is basically the relationship between the gravitational pull of the moon on the Earth and that of the Earth on the moon. Despite being the 5th largest continent, Antarctica holds 70% of the planet's fresh water and about 90% of its ice. Bangkok is the most visited city in the world, boasting 23 million visitors in 2019 alone. Paris, London, Dubai, and Singapore make up the other cities in the top 5. The lowest layer of Earth's atmosphere is called the troposphere and is the reason we have weather. Sunlight heats the planet's surface, which causes warm air to rise up to the troposphere. This air then expands and cools as the air pressure decreases and sinks down, where it is then warmed by the Earth again. Coral reefs are the largest living structures on the planet, with some even being visible from space. Coral reefs hold the most species per area of any of Earth's ecosystems, even more than rainforests. Earth got its name around 1,000 years ago, and it comes from the German word meaning the ground, but there's no evidence to show who actually named it. Of all the planets, Earth is also the only one which is not named after a Greek or Roman deity. The deepest point of the ocean is the Mariana Trench. It's a whopping 7 miles below sea level. Coastlines cover about 20% of U.S. land, but are home to more than 50% of the U.S. population. The Earth isn't actually a sphere. It's more like a squished ball that bulges at the equator. The bulge is caused by the force of the Earth spinning, which makes the north and south poles slightly flat. The Earth spins on its axis, which is basically an imaginary straight line. Earth has seasons because the axis is tilted, causing the sun's rays to hit different parts of the planet more directly, depending on the time of year. If the sun was as tall as a standard door, the Earth would be around the size of a nickel. The Earth's rate of rotation is gradually decreasing. It's happening so slowly that it would take as much as 140 million years for the length of a day to increase to 25 hours.
Get equipped for any season with brand new Brightside merch. Click the link and grab your print.
The biggest animal on Earth is the Antarctic blue whale. It can reach lengths of 100 feet and weigh up to 400,000 pounds, which is around the same as 33 elephants. The temperature at the center of the Earth is around the same as the surface of the Sun, at almost 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Earth is around 10,000 times older than humans. Earth is around 4.5 billion years old, whereas humans have been around for, at most, 450,000 years. There are around 34,000 known species of fish. The actual number is way higher though, as a whopping 95% of our oceans still haven't been explored. America's Route 66 is longer than the journey to the Earth's core. The distance to the core is roughly 2,000 miles. Route 66 is almost 2,500 miles. The Earth is made up of 3 main components: the crust, the mantle, and the core, which is divided into the outer core and the inner core. Scientists have estimated that there are around 8.7 million species on the planet. Out of this, between 1 to 2 million of these species are animals. But roughly 86% of land species and 91% of fish have yet to be discovered by humans. Ancient astronomers used to think that the Earth was the center of the universe. For 2,000 years, they believed the Earth to be static, while other bodies traveled in orbit around us. In 1543, Copernicus published his sun-centered model of the solar system. Earth is the densest planet in the solar system. The density varies across its different crusts, but the planet's average density is just over 3 ounces per cubic inch. Mount Everest is the highest point on the planet. Its peak is the highest altitude above sea level at around 5.5 miles. Each year, 1 septillion crystals of snow fall on Earth. That's a trillion snowflakes. Snow covers about 31% of Earth's land area each year. Of Earth's water, only around 3% is fresh water. The other 97% is salted. Of that 3%, about 2% is frozen in ice and glaciers. So, less than 1% of the planet's fresh water is actually in lakes, rivers, and underground. The world's largest inland body of water, or lake to us normal people, is the Caspian Sea. It has an area of 140,000 miles squared. The world's deepest lake is Lake Baikal in Russia and is 5,300 feet deep. Earth's atmosphere is roughly 78% nitrogen and 21% oxygen, with small amounts of water vapor, carbon dioxide, and other gases. No other planet is believed to have this much oxygen, which explains why Earth is the only planet where life has been discovered so far. Apart from the Moon, There are 2 asteroids in co-orbital orbits with Earth, sometimes called Earth's second moon. 3753 Cruithne is an asteroid that looks like it's following the Earth in orbit, but it's actually following its own path around the Sun. 2002 AA29 is another asteroid which makes a horseshoe orbit around the Earth that draws it close to the planet every 95 years.
You have friends over for dinner. You set your drink on the counter and go help your friend set out some desserts. When you get back, you notice the liquid in your cup. It's sloshing around and the ice cubes look like ships on a rough sea. Now you feel it too. On the ceiling, the chandelier is swinging like mad. Then you hear someone scream, "Earthquake!" The house and everything in it is rocking back and forth. You try to run for cover, but the shaking keeps you stuck in place, fighting to keep your balance. The cabinets look possessed, and glasses and dishes fly out and smash on the floor. The bookshelves topple over, and everything hanging on the walls sways and falls off. You duck under the dining room table, trying not to get hurt on all those broken dishes. Yeah, you've been through earthquakes before, but none like this. Checking your phone? Typical, no signal. You can't believe what's about to happen. The screams get louder, and suddenly the whole house collapses. The biggest earthquake ever recorded happened in Chile in 1960. Disaster came in the afternoon, just when everyone was out enjoying themselves. To cause serious life-changing damage, you need to have a magnitude of around 7 or so on the Richter scale. This one was 9.5. This part of Chile is smack dab on the so-called Ring of Fire, the most active volcanic and seismic area in the world along the Pacific Rim. The initial shaking lasted around 10 minutes, and after 2 days, many aftershocks were still strong enough to set off a volcano in the south of the country. But that's not where it ended. The earthquake unleashed a series of tidal waves all over the Pacific Ocean, with some reaching over 80 feet high. The waves in earthquake were so strong that they even affected Hawaii, Japan, and the Philippines. It caused around $500 million $1960 worth of damage. Many were left homeless. Much of their infrastructure was smashed too. Buildings as far as the eye could see were toppled, and debris piled everywhere. Scientists estimate that this earthquake was so powerful, it shifted the Earth's axis, making our days 1.26 microseconds shorter. That might not seem like a lot, but think about it. Just one natural disaster was strong enough to make time move. Many of the coastal cities were flattened and floods were widespread. The economy spiraled downward. According to studies, if this earthquake happened today, it caused more than $20 billion in damages. So what would happen if an earthquake twice that size hit without warning? For starters, you'd likely feel the effects even further away. Tidal waves wouldn't just hit the coasts of Japan and the Philippines. They would move even further to China, Korea, Vietnam, and even Australia. And those waves would be significantly higher than 80 feet, perhaps double that. That's like 8 giraffes piled on top of each other, surfing your way. If you lived by the coast, you'd notice the waves. If you saw the water recede way back so you could practically see where all the fish call home, you'd know it was time to run. Chances are that a tsunami's heading your way. Say it really happens. You're caught under the wreckage, not knowing what's going on. You manage to free yourself and escape to the fresh air. And you're not alone, because all the houses in the neighborhood have turned into piles of bricks and rubble. The bridges have also collapsed, leaving people stranded on either side. You look around, dust yourself off, and rush to find help. Fire trucks and ambulances drive between the broken-down cars and rubble. You try to make it to your car, but the aftershocks are still hitting, and you're getting tossed to the sidewalk. With all the cell towers down, you can't call anyone on your phone. Your knees are shaking, but you manage to power through. Once you reach your car, you see it crushed under a boulder, like a giant soda can. You continue on foot and eventually reach downtown. It looks as if some giant got angry and knocked all the buildings down. You push forward and try to see if you can find some help. Without warning, your phone vibrates. You check it and see 1,000 notifications about a 20 magnitude earthquake. You're still shaking, but that's all you. The ground is still for now. Uh-oh. You hear something in the distance, racing towards you. To your right, you see tidal waves as tall as buildings charging at you. Still in shock, not knowing what to do, you now come to your senses and run. You don't even know which way to go. There's a tsunami right behind you, and in front of you are broken down buildings with rocks and concrete still falling everywhere. Wait, there's a building that's somehow still standing. You need to get on top of that thing. You reach the elevator, but it's jammed. Not surprising. You bolt up the stairs as fast as you can, tripping on broken glass and plaster, but always managing to get back up. You look out a window and see the water. It's so close. You're nearly at the top. A few more flights and… whoosh. The water forces its way into the building and drags you down at least 2 floors. You can barely see anything. Still, you know you must swim up. But the water keeps forcing you downwards. After about 30 seconds, you manage to swim your way out and continue climbing to the top. You scramble to the top floor and collapse on the roof. You're safe for now. The tidal wave is still going strong, plowing its way through the ravaged city center. Your phone is now waterlogged and useless. You have a perfect 360-degree view of your town covered in water and debris. The ground starts to shake again. Maybe you'll just sit around until this is all over, waiting for the rescue helicopter. But then, a loud explosion that almost breaks your eardrums shakes the ground even more. Off in the distance, smoke is rising, and soon it covers the entire sky. Darkness hides the morning sun. That's when you can see lava shooting up into the air and landing nearby. The lava forms into a river, flowing its way into town block by block. With this much seismic movement and the high intensity of the earthquake, the world's tectonic plates have shifted so that magma is pushing its way to the surface. From the earth, steam begins to vent. Then the heat hits you. You see the magma cover the ground like a blanket, eating up every car in its way. What's worse is that the magma is melting the foundations of the buildings that managed to withstand the earthquake and the tsunami. The buildings in the distance are now sinking and collapsing into the raging lava pool that's replaced your town. One by one, every building descends. That means, uh-oh, the building where you're standing is also swaying. It's about to fail. That's when you see the light. You look up and see a helicopter above in the distance. You wave your arms, run around, jump, anything to get noticed. And it works. The chopper makes a few circles and finally drops you a rope ladder. As you're lifted in the chopper, you take a good look at the world below you as it wriggles around like noodles in a strainer. You land a few miles out and are immediately treated by a doctor in an emergency triage center. You were one of the lucky ones. A year later, the tsunami water has receded. The lava that flowed inland has cooled, but all that magma permanently changed the ground below it, and the whole town is gone. The disaster has thrown the entire country into a financial nightmare that'll last decades. It takes months to survey the town, making sure there's no dangerous electrical wires or busted gas pipes anywhere. They're rebuilding your town farther inland from where the old one was. In other towns, they rebuild directly over the ruins. In others, they just decide to move everyone to a nearby city.
For hundreds of years, people in the US have reported hearing strange, loud booms. These mysterious sounds are called skyquakes. And yep, it's a real thing. If you've ever heard a loud, distant booming noise that definitely wasn't a thunderstorm or a car engine backfire, congrats, it looks like you've experienced a skyquake yourself. People report them all around the globe, from the US to India and Japan. They go under different names, and we still don't know why exactly they happen. Sometimes these booms come together with earthquakes. People heard them during the New Madrid earthquakes in the early 19th century and up until January 2020. Those who've experienced them describe skyquakes as a rushing or rolling noise. Famous American writer James Fenimore Cooper described it more poetically as the lake speaking to the surrounding hills, which send back the echoes of its voice in accurate reply. Sometimes these mysterious booms happen in cold weather instead of during earthquakes. One of the skyquake hotspots is near Lake Seneca in New York. They call them the Seneca Guns. The booms can be so loud that they shake windows and doors. Back in August 1886, after an earthquake in Charleston, people heard these noises for several weeks, happening at the same time as many aftershocks from the earthquake. In 2020, scientists from the University of North Carolina looked at old news pieces, especially from North Carolina, where people have often reported these sounds. They hoped to match the noises with earthquakes data, but they didn't find any link between the sounds and earthquakes. One of the researchers said they believe the noises are happening in the air, not underground. The team looked at infrasounds, which are low-frequency noises that humans can't hear. They found signals lasting 1 to 10 seconds that match the times when people reported hearing the booms, but nothing is certain here. Some people think that solar flares, underwater tsunamis, or caves collapsing under the sea cause skyquakes. Others believe the sounds come from planes making loud sonic booms, but that doesn't explain old records of skyquakes from the past before planes were even invented. Some scientists think a type of meteor called a bolide causes these booms. These meteors blow up when they hit Earth's atmosphere. If this happened above thick clouds, the sound would get louder and travel far, but we wouldn't find anything on the ground. Another idea is that gas might be escaping from the bottom of deep lakes, like Lake Seneca. If you think skyquakes are bizarre, let me introduce you to fog bows. They also go under the name of white rainbows, ghost rainbows, or cloud bows. They form in a similar way to regular colorful rainbows, but are much wider. Rainbows happen when there are big raindrops in the sky, and you can always spot them on the opposite side of where the sun is shining. Fog bows are made by tiny droplets in fog, or clouds, instead of big raindrops, and they also appear opposite the sun. If you want to see a fog bow, you need to look for it in a thin fog when the sun is bright. You might catch one when the sun starts to shine through the fog, or if you're near the ocean where fog often forms. Because the water droplets in fog are so tiny, fog bows don't have bright colors like rainbows. They might even look all white, or just have faint colors. Some fog bows are hard to see at first because they blend into the mist, but once you spot them, they're easy to recognize. The next rare weather phenomenon you gotta watch out for is thunder snow. You guessed it right, it's a special type of thunderstorm that happens during a snowstorm. Unlike regular thunderstorms that often strike in the spring and summer, thunder snow is much rarer because it happens in the strongest winter storms, like big blizzards, and at the same time needs warm air, which isn't a frequent combo. So, for thunder snow to happen, there needs to be moisture in the air, some instability, and something to lift the air, like rising winds. Just like in normal thunderstorms, lightning can appear when you hear thunder. Thunder snow lightning usually goes from cloud to cloud instead of hitting the ground, and the thunder sounds different too, more like a low rumble instead of a loud boom, because the snow muffles the sound. You aren't so likely to get struck by it, but it's still important to stay inside when you hear thunder to stay safe. Northern Lights fans, this one is for you. Scientists noticed a new kind of glow in the sky that looked like a purple streak. They nicknamed it Steve as a joke, but later gave it a more scientific name: Strong Thermal Emission Velocity Enhancement, Steve for short. Steve is actually a fast-moving stream of super hot gas that always moves west and only shows up before midnight. They wondered if something like Steve could happen after midnight, but moving in the opposite direction. And now, scientists think they found the anti-Steve by looking at data from a research station in Norway. In December 2021, they took a picture of a bright purple streak stretching for 620 miles in the sky. and it only appeared after midnight. Satellites from the European Space Agency also measured the conditions in this part of the sky and found that the ions were moving eastward. Steve's late-night twin hasn't been officially named yet, but it would be cool if it was called Sam, which is short for Steve after midnight. If you've ever seen snow on a sunny day when falling from the sky without a single cloud, it must have been diamond dust. It's a special kind of weather with millions of tiny ice crystals forming close to the ground. These ice crystals float slowly in the air, kind of like how dust floats in your house. When sunlight hits these crystals, they sparkle like diamonds. Unlike regular snow, diamond dust can fall from a cloudless sky, which is why they sometimes call it clear sky precipitation. It happens because of temperature inversion. Normally, it gets colder as you go higher up from the ground. But in a temperature inversion, the cold air stays near the ground, and warmer air sits above it. The warm air has more water vapor, and when it mixes with cold air near the ground, it turns directly into ice crystals, and diamond dust is born. For this to happen, the air near the ground has to be really, really cold, way below freezing temperature. Diamond dust can fall for days, but it's so light that it usually doesn't pile up on the ground like regular snow. A fall streak hole, also known as a hole punch cloud, is next on our list. This big circular or oval-shaped gap sometimes appears in certain clouds. These types of clouds float high up in the sky and are often made of tiny water droplets that are colder than freezing, but they haven't frozen yet. These special water droplets are called supercooled, and they need a reason to freeze. Ice crystals give them that reason. When a plane flies through the cloud, it can bring those ice crystals into the cloud. Once the ice crystals are there, the supercooled water droplets freeze quickly, get bigger, and start to fall from the ground. This creates a hole in the cloud, and as more nearby droplets freeze, the hole gets bigger and spreads outward. Any tornado is scary, but a fire tornado takes the horror to a new level. These bad boys are spinning towers of flame and ash that form when there's extreme heat, strong winds, and uneven ground. The intense heat from the fire causes hot air to rise quickly. Cooler air from the sides rushes in to replace it and creates strong winds. When winds from different directions meet, it makes the fire spin like a tornado. It gets stronger and can even create its own weather. It pulls in flames, ash, dirt, and anything in its path. The winds can reach speeds of over 140 miles per hour, and these fire tornadoes can last for more than 20 minutes. When you mention your plans to travel to Tristan da Cunha, the chances are your friends won't even know where this remote island is located. No wonder. Tristan da Cunha is considered the most remote inhabited archipelago in the world, with the nearest populated land, St. Helena, around 1,500 miles away. There are only 229 people living on Tristan da Cunha now. In such a close-knit community, everyone is someone's cousin, uncle, or maybe just a friend, but everyone knows each other for sure. There are as few as 10 last names on the island, representing just 10 families. Getting there is quite an adventure. There are no airports on the island, which means your journey will be primarily by sea. Typically, it requires a days-long voyage from South Africa. Only 3 ships regularly service the island, with fewer than a dozen trips each year. Some cruise lines may include it in their itineraries, but travel arrangements must be made well in advance, due to limited berths available on the ship from Cape Town. And you'll also need landing permission. While Tristan doesn't have traditional hotels, there are several guest houses, and you might also have the chance to stay with a local family. They will provide you with a place to sleep, 3 meals a day, and laundry services. 88% of what you pay goes directly to the island family, and only 12% is tax. By the way, the accommodation is surprisingly affordable. It was around £65 for a full board in 2024. Yep, they do use sterling, being a part of overseas British territory. But there's also this local currency called St. Helena pound, used at parity with sterlings. By the way, it's only been around 80 years since the island started using actual money. In 1942, the naval station began paying cash wages, and it helped Tristan Islanders to move from a barter economy to a cash-based system, and allowed them the novelty of making their first cash purchases. Just a heads up, pack everything you might need before you go, as you definitely won't come across Walmart there. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's a supermarket and all, but it's just not the way you're used to, with endless shelves displaying endless oversized mayo jars. Tristan's Island store, often referred to as the supermarket, lacks plate glass windows and flashy advertisements, and let's be honest, it looks like an abandoned barn from the outside. Still, it plays a crucial role in providing essential goods to complement locally produced foods and woolens. If a resident wants to buy something, they must place orders months in advance for items that arrive with incoming ships. The store operates Monday through Friday. Today, the islanders continue to cultivate their own crops and raise livestock. The supermarket has become a vital source for other essentials like flour, sugar, and a variety of groceries including frozen bread and products typical of the UK or South African supermarkets. And even though the island's economy relies heavily on fishing, especially rock lobsters, islanders are largely self-sufficient. Let's move to another destination that's super hard to reach, but this time it's a level up in difficulty. I'm talking about the notorious Hypoxia City, the place with the smallest amount of oxygen on the planet. Sure thing, it's a nickname. The real name is La Rinconada. This place is located in Peru. Getting there means climbing over 16,000 feet up into the mountains. And what did you expect from the highest city on Earth? Despite its hard-to-reach location, it houses way more people than Tristan da Cunha, between 30,000 and 50,000. And while the island in the middle of nowhere looks idyllic, the Peruvian city of La Rinconada has very different looks. The urban layout features predominantly low-rise residences, where essential services are limited. La Rinconada is without a reliable supply of running water and lacks a sewage system. The community does not have a waste collection service, which forces residents to either burn or bury their garbage. Moreover, up until the early 2000s, La Rinconada did not have access to electricity. Most things, including the most essential foods, must be brought here from outside. Despite originally being a miner city, right now it has a wider range of activities to make your living. Some people are busy with trading, food, clothes, you name it. Others provide services, and some people even open public restrooms. Architectural-wise, La Rinconada has very little to offer. The pattern is quite predictable. Huts made from corrugated metal that are unstable and rusting. The choice of materials is dictated by practicality. These metal sheets are the lightest and easiest for miners to transport to the glacier. Unfortunately, the homes lack proper insulation, leaving residents shivering in the cold even though they have access to wool from local sheep, which is an excellent insulator. Sturdier rock homes exist but are rare, typically inhabited by wealthier miners. While the architecture might not be particularly captivating, the vistas certainly are. In nearly every spot in La Rinconada, a glance upward reveals La Bella Durmiente, or Sleeping Beauty, a massive glacier towering over the town. Getting to La Rinconada is very hard. First, you'll need to fly into Alejandro Velasco Astete International Airport in Cusco, Peru. Once you're in Cusco, you can catch a train or a bus to Puno, which is right by Lake Titicaca. Here's where it gets a bit tricky. The only way to really get up to La Rinconada is by hitchhiking or finding a ride into the mountains. There might be some buses, but they don't run on a set schedule. If you're up for it, you can rent a car, but be warned, the roads can be pretty rough and tricky to navigate. So a little extra caution goes a long way on this adventure. Unlike Tristan da Cunha, where they adopted cashback in the 1940s, La Rinconada doesn't rely much on it. The economy of this place is based mainly on gold mines. The mines are unguarded, unregulated, and often dangerous. Miners work for 30 days under a cachorreo system, where on the 31st day, they're allowed to take as much ore from the mine as they can carry as a form of payment. La Rinconada has no bank, but it has many storefront fund transfer agencies, which miners use to wire money to their families. Still, they never know how much they're gonna send. Our next destination is Svalbard, a place that might seem unwelcoming due to its climate. But locals embrace everyone with open arms. No visa is required if you want to visit or even work there. Located near the top of the world, Svalbard offers a unique and remote charm. The capital, Longyearbyen, is home to a fascinatingly diverse community, with over 50 nationalities represented among its 2,400 residents. You might even spot a polar bear wandering into town on occasion. The living space is compact. There's just one grocery store, and the streets are numbered instead of named, adding to the town's distinctive feel. Longyearbyen also boasts a university center with around 300 students. Interestingly, every student must learn to use firearms for safety in the surrounding wilderness. Originally, it was founded as a mining town, just like La Rinconada, but the focus has shifted mainly to tourism. However, a quirky tradition remains from its mining days. Visitors and residents alike take off their shoes when entering hotels and restaurants, a practice born out of the need to keep coal dust at bay. The last destination for today is Palmerston Island, a remote coral atoll in the Cook Islands, located about 290 miles northwest of Rarotonga. Famous traveler James Cook visited it on June 16, 1774, and the place was uninhabited at the time, despite ancient graves found there. Today, the island supports a small population of just 25 residents, primarily descendants of 19th century English sailor William Marsters. Marsters arrived in 1863 with 2 Polynesian wives and later added a third. He fathered 23 children. Fishing is the mainstay of the local economy, resembling subsistence living due to the island's isolation. Modern amenities and communication services are available. Although there's no airport, cargo ships visit periodically.
You come to sunny California and go for a hike in the San Lucia Mountains. There, you have a strange, unpleasant feeling, as if someone's watching you. You look around but don't see a single soul. That's when you glance at the tops of distant mountains in front of you and your heart skips a beat. Up on the peaks, you can see the outline of a giant humanoid figure, arms stretched out with a magnificent full rainbow circling it. This mysterious figure is dressed in all black. You can't make out any facial expressions or detail, but you can see it moving. Then it vanishes right before your eyes. Congrats! You've just witnessed the Dark Watchers, a phenomenon that's been terrifying hikers in the California mountains for over 300 years. Even now, scientists can't give an exact explanation for this mysterious appearance. What we do know is it's completely natural. Probably. One theory claims that there are no silhouettes at all. The human brain just thinks up images created by shadows the clouds cast on the mountains. Over the centuries, people share stories about this legend, and their minds begin to show it, building recognizable objects. The same can happen to you, like when you see the contours of a human face on a burnt piece of toast or the shape of a dog in a passing cloud. The most accepted scientific explanation is what's called a Bakken specter. It's when sunlight gets bent by drops of fog or clouds. That explains the rainbow surrounding these figures. As for the shadow, it's only your own being stretched and projected on the mountains before you. After all, these figures usually show up when the sun is behind the witness. Natural or not, the vanishing mysterious figures scared the wits out of you. So we head to Antarctica. Snow, ice, and more blinding sun. Yep, it's a desert too. The light is almost blinding. You squint and off in the distance, you see something red sticking out from all the surrounding endless white. As you get closer, you realize it's a waterfall, an ominous red cascade flowing from the glacier. Splashes fly in all directions and stain the white snow. Don't worry, these so-called blood falls are nothing of the sort. Millions of years ago, hey, I wasn't around then, a glacier formed over a pond and blocked access to sunlight, heat, and oxygen. Then the pond managed to break through the glacier with a little trickle of water. When such salty waters with high levels of iron meets oxygen, it creates that scarlet rust color. This is the only waterfall of its kind in the world. As soon as you come to the Namib Desert, you immediately notice something very strange. Sprinkled among the dry grasslands are almost perfect circles of dirt where nothing grows. These massive polka dots are called fairy circles, and, you guessed it, nobody really knows what causes them. The likely culprit is termites eating the grass around their underground colony. That could also explain the circles' differing sizes. The bugs continue to eat as the colony expands outwards, but they stop before they encroach on a neighboring colony. Well, that's neighborly. The patches where you do see grass show a sort of boundary separating different termite populations. So goes the theory. Heading down to Australia's Lake Hillier. Your eyes don't deceive you. Yes, that lake is bubblegum pink and is perfectly safe to swim in. The giant pink puddle is a salt lake, and it's not the only one of its kind in the world. Salt lakes are pink because of a kind of algae and other microorganisms living in them. They produce a red pigment to protect themselves from the sun. What's unique about Lake Hillier, though, is the water is still pink even if you scoop it up into a glass, and it remains bright pink all year round. The same can't be said about other pink lakes. Southeast Asia. You see a tree that looks as if someone poured paint all over it. But the rainbow eucalyptus was painted by nature. Its unusual bark changes colors over time, like a kaleidoscope. It starts off as a bright green shade, then red, orange, purple, and finally brown. Then the colorful cycle starts again. Blood rain looks more terrifying than any horror movie, but in reality, there's nothing strange or unnatural about this weather phenomenon. People have known about such scarlet-tinted rains since the times of ancient Rome. Sometimes, powerful winds lift red dust into the atmosphere and carry it far, far away, to another galaxy. In the end, this dust gets mixed with clouds, which colors the rain. By the way, dust from coal mines can make the rain black. Pollen is responsible for yellow rains, and some other kinds of dust can turn rainwater white. Back in 2009, people in Ishikawa, Japan saw a kind of rain no one's ever seen before. It was raining tadpoles. The first reason was that the wind that day was so strong, it lifted and carried all those tadpoles away in no time. The second possible reason was that big birds such as gulls just dropped them while they were flying to their nests. Some scientists believe these creatures were hauled off the ground by a waterspout and rained down later. By the way, that day people found not only tadpoles, but also frogs and fish instead of puddles. And yep, it can be raining worms too. Some people claim they've seen snake rains. Yikes! And instead of common raindrops, people have watched translucent jelly-like blobs falling down from the skies. Now, Australian spiders are notorious, and to frighten people, they've even learned how to rain. Spider rains are a pretty common thing in Australia because of ballooning. They climb up trees, then spin strands of silk, and that's why the wind can carry them away. Usually people don't notice it, but when it's wet, hundreds of spiders climb up to more desirable places. People say that when it rains or snows, it's possible to see spiders literally drift down on those webs as if they were balloons. If you ever travel to the Mekong River, you'll probably have a chance to see glowing balls rising up from the water and beelining straight into the air. The locals call these the Naga fireballs. Sizes may vary, so these reddish balls can be as tiny as a cherry and as large as a watermelon. During the night, you can see dozens and sometimes even thousands of fireballs. Scientists don't have any solid explanation why it happens, but it's probably flammable gas released by the marshy environment. Still, a local superstition claims it's all because of a giant serpent living in the Mekong. Now, shelf clouds look like something from a sci-fi movie. They form when warm and moist air gets caught in a thunderstorm updraft. These ominous clouds most often mean a storm is coming. Breathtaking rainbow clouds appear on top of cotton-like puffy clouds after thunderstorms. The puffy clouds are low-altitude ones. When the water vapor they contain condenses, the resulting droplets act like prisms. This forms multicolored caps over the clouds. Morning glory clouds are extremely rare. They look like massive tubes stretching across the sky. Most researchers agree that these clouds appear when an updraft squeezes through the cloud. This creates the signature rolling appearance. The cool air at the back of the cloud makes it sink downward. The best, but not the only place to see morning glory is Australia's Gulf of Carpentaria. If you decide to travel there to see these clouds, choose a period from late September or October to early November. Huge white lumps over your head are called mammatus clouds. They make you believe the sky is falling. Most clouds form when air rises in the atmosphere, but not mammatus ones. They appear when moist and cool air goes down and mixes with dry air. The result? Unique puffed rice clouds. By the way, if you spot this phenomenon, bad weather is just around the corner. Whoa, mama! If you get to the bottom of the Caribbean just off the coast of Cuba, you'll see circular columns, paved floors, symmetrical stone structures. That's what the Cuban underwater city looks like. Why was a large city abandoned? Lots of people believe the ruins once belonged to a long-forgotten civilization. But scientists have their doubts. They claim the lost city is nothing but a natural phenomenon that appeared about 5 million years ago. Such disc and donut structures often occur around the areas of the seafloor where natural gases break free. Those who have ever heard an annoying sound a kettle makes when the water is boiling can imagine what the whistle sounds like. Even though this noise isn't as blood-curdling as some other unexplained sounds, it doesn't make the whistle any less mysterious. It's incredibly elusive. In 1997, only one underwater microphone was able to pick it up. At that time, researchers didn't manage to pinpoint the source of the noise. The most likely cause of the unusual sound is the eruption of one of the submarine volcanoes. But once again, there's not enough proof to make sure.
You rub your eyes, trying to make sense of everything. Perfect circular holes in the bottom of the ocean floor off the coast of Big Sur in California. You have no idea how this happened, even though you're a marine biologist who's been practicing it for years. You go through some of the old records and find out that these holes have been around since the 90s. In 1999, a ship-mounted sonar conducted a survey and found 5,200 of these pock marks, or large holes over 500 square miles, on the ocean floor. They look like moon craters underwater. You contact your team and get the robot ready to go down and explore the scene and bring back a few samples. You and the team drive to the coast and hop on the boat. You're sitting inside controlling the robot with a joystick. Your teammate sets the robot in the water and drives it down. Everything seems normal near the surface, but as the robot goes lower, the pockmarks start appearing. A bunch of boats swift past you, making you lose your balance and focus. The robot turns on the flashlight so you can see better. But as it goes lower, the resolution is less crisp. It almost reaches the bottom, and the holes are smooth and nearly perfect circular shapes. Some of these holes that were visible in the sonar reading measure more than 30 feet across and 15 feet deep. You show the rest of your teammates the images, and they're shocked. The robot continues swimming, but there appear to be more holes all around. Many of them are too small for the scanner to capture from above. These microdepressions are steep and have sort of tails going in a certain direction. It's possible that the currents underwater played a role in their shape. Everywhere the robot swims, there are new holes all around. After a couple of hours, the robot goes back to the boat with some samples. You take them back to the lab and study them. The robot clearly captures images of human trash, but the samples don't indicate anything alarming for now. Despite the fact that 1/3 of the pockets are filled with trash, there's still no explanation of how they were formed. It's late at night and the rest of your team heads back home. You're passing out in the lab, still trying to find some answers. You wake up the next day, and while cooking breakfast, you get this idea that maybe these holes are gases venting out, which could be harmful to marine life. You quickly get the robot and sail out to the ocean once more. This time, you didn't even think about calling your teammates. You place the robot in the water and get behind the screen to control it. The robot descends to the bottom of the ocean and does a survey. So far, the holes still seem to be covered with trash. But some of the holes have marine life dwelling inside, like fish and seaweed. After much scanning, it doesn't look like they're producing any bubbles, which means there aren't any gases venting out, but you're determined to find them. After a while, you reach one of those large pock marks, and the robot starts scanning around. You find some bubbles coming from a source, but the robot can't reach it. It swims around trying to find a spot, but nothing. You bring the robot back to the lab and work on it. You attach some mechanical arms on it that can lift things and move them. You bring the robot back down to the same spot, but the bubbles aren't as frequent as before. You use the arms to move some of the trash and find out that the bubbles are being produced by a group of crabs chilling next to a pile of plastic. Bingo! The bad news is, you still don't have a clue why the microdepressions and pockmarks exist. As you try to control the robot to go back to the surface, an octopus wraps its tentacles around it, pulling the robot down. You struggle with the controls and push it to maximum power, but the suctions of the octopus are too strong to break off. It's a game of tug-of-war with the octopus and your robot. It takes the robot under a pile of trash, thinking it's lunch. But you use the arms to maneuver the robot out and swim back to the surface. You go back to the lab even more confused. The robot has collected more samples for you to study. Your eye is glued to your microscope, trying to figure out what's going on, but nothing. You decide to do a carbon dating test to determine how old these holes are. After a while, you check out the results and are even more stunned than before. They show that the holes are around 400,000 years old, so it's likely that human trash wasn't the cause for all this. You pull many all-nighters trying to figure out the truth. You gather your team once more and hold a small press conference about this. You claim that this may be something we should be extremely worried about, but you still can't tell them more than what you know. With all the brain work put together, you find out that the large pockmarks haven't changed or been active for more than 50,000 years. The newer holes were most likely created by human trash settling in the bottom of the ocean floor. The marine life gathered some of this trash like plastics and discarded fishing gear and created homes for themselves. This is why around 4,500 of the holes are newer and have trash in them. But it still doesn't answer why the holes appeared in the first place. You're back to square one. The only way to see what's really going on is to clear up the trash from underwater and study them. The story makes headlines in the local community and catches the attention of a cleanup crew. You organize a trip to the ocean and begin the extraction of all the trash. Many cleanup boats arrive and everyone drops down a net to collect the trash. You send down the robot once more to make sure the nets are hitting the right spot. As most of the trash is being collected, many marine life animals scramble and try to find a way to escape. Everyone makes sure not to hurt them. After a couple of weeks, all the holes are cleared up from the trash. You do another sonar scan from the surface and can see the holes clearer than before. But you still don't have an answer for this. You do some more research trying to see if any other holes appeared around the world. On the other side of the country is a mysterious blue hole off of Florida's Gulf Coast. You catch the nearest flight to Florida and make an appointment with the scientists in charge of the expedition. Blue holes are underwater sinkholes that open below the seabed. Just like on the surface, the underwater world also has sinkholes. This one is called the Green Banana and is 150 feet below. And the hole is 435 feet deep. You dive with some special gear with the rest of the team to a barren ocean floor, and the hole is right there in front of you, looking like an oasis in the desert. You and the rest of the scientists are surprised by the diverse marine life dwelling within. Some sea turtles swim past you, and even sharks. These ones don't harm humans. Halfway through, you reach a narrow path, which makes it difficult for humans to pass through. But everyone is careful. There are corals, sponges, mollusks around the corner. You collect some samples and go back to the lab. Blue holes in general are richer in nutrients than barren lands and host plenty of unique marine life. They're quite common, and don't pose any sort of threat to anyone. After making the connections, you don't think the holes off the coast of California have anything to do with blue holes. The mystery goes on.
The strongest earthquake ever to strike east of the Mississippi River that happened over 200 years ago was never over, according to some scientists. Most earthquakes last seconds to minutes, and the official record breaker so far is a silent one in Sumatra that was going on for 32 years. This slow slip event triggered a massive quake and a tsunami. So if it's true that the new Madrid earthquake is still sending aftershocks, we'll have a new top name for this sad list. The earthquake started in December of 1811 with a powerful quake in a sparsely populated part of northeast Arkansas. They felt the shaking almost 1,000 miles away in the White House, and the tower bells were ringing in Boston, even further away. It even made the mighty Mississippi flow backward for a few minutes over new waterfalls formed by shifted ground. The town of New Madrid, Missouri, completely disappeared in the disaster. The Earth wouldn't stay still until the end of January the following year, when things got serious again. A massive quake hit, this time near the junction of the Ohio and Mississippi rivers, right in the Missouri boot heel. Geologists believe it was a rupture on the New Madrid Fault, putting even more strain on the nearby Reelfoot Fault. Just when people thought it couldn't get worse, another 2 weeks of trembling passed, and the Reelfoot Fault snapped deep beneath New Madrid. Down in Tennessee, about 15 miles south of New Madrid, the ground uplift created Reelfoot Lake. Steamboats were chugging along the river, with thousands of trees floating and acres of woods torn apart by the quake. In St. Louis, Missouri, which is 160 miles away, buildings were badly damaged, and chimneys fell in Cincinnati, Ohio, 400 miles away. People all the way in Montreal, Canada, over 1,000 miles away, felt the earthshake. Seismologists have registered about 200 small earthquakes in the New Madrid Seismic Zone every year since 1974. Some researchers believe that up to 30% of those were aftershocks from those big quakes back in 1811 and 1812. In parts of the U.S. where there's not much tectonic action going on, these aftershocks could keep rumbling for years, maybe even centuries, after the big ones hit. Aftershocks are the Earth's way of releasing all that built-up stress from the main quake. When the ground shakes from the first earthquake, it puts a lot of pressure on the rocks nearby. And when those rocks can't take it anymore, they crack, causing even more shaking. That's the aftershock. And they can be pretty intense, especially right after the main quake, but weaken over time. Not all scientists agree that contemporary earthquakes have to do with those from 200 years ago. We mostly associate faults with those lines where Earth's plates meet. But there's a whole network of those right under the center of the North American plate. They're like relics from 750 million years ago, when North America was part of a supercontinent called Rodinia. When Rodinia started to break up, it left behind these rifts, weak spots in the Earth's crust that run deep beneath the modern Midwest. It could explain the earthquake action. An international team of geologists decided to take a fresh look at 3 major earthquakes that shook North America and end the debate. They used a new math method called the nearest neighbor. It says that if earthquakes are too close in space, time, and magnitude to be independent background events, then one is assumed to have triggered the other. Depending on how you look at the numbers, somewhere between 10 to 65% of the recent quakes in the region could be aftershocks of those historic earthquakes. And a huge quake that hit Charleston, South Carolina at the end of the 19th century might explain up to 72% of the earthquakes in the area since then. But not all places are the same, so the scientific debate continues. In 1774, British explorer James Cook noticed a glow in the distance. It was the volcano of Mount Yasur in Vanuatu. This bad boy had been spewing lava and ash ever since, and it's quite likely that it's been doing that for way longer. The volcano has been sitting at alert level since October 2016, which means things are really unsettled around there. They've even marked off a 2,000-foot radius around the crater to keep people safe. There have been low to moderate outbursts, shooting out ash, gas, and steam, and some bigger blasts throwing stuff outside the crater. Satellite images have picked up on some hot spots of sulfur dioxide plumes, showing that Yasur is still cooking up a big storm down there. Stromboli, one of the volcanic islands near Sicily, officially has the Guinness World Record as the longest continuously erupting volcano. It has been putting on a fiery show for over 2,400 years straight. Ancient sailors nicknamed it the Lighthouse of the Mediterranean. Most of the time, Stromboli's just spitting out spatter, but every now and then it throws in some lava flows or shoots up some moderately high fountains. Sometimes you might even catch a glimpse of steam-driven outbursts. Over 200 million years ago, the world went through a major makeover, with not one, not two, but 4 massive volcanic eruptions changing the game. It all happened in Rensselaer, a large chunk of island that used to be a supermassive volcano stretching across what's now British Columbia and Alaska. This volcanic activity might have helped dinosaurs grow from cat-sized critters into giants we saw in Jurassic Park. It kicked off a 2-million-year rainy season. It made the whole world hot and humid, and the dinos just loved it. Researchers dug deep into sediment layers beneath an ancient lake in China to uncover these secrets. They found traces of volcanic ash and mercury, clear signs of those epic eruptions. There were carbon signatures showing huge spikes in carbon dioxide levels, making the atmosphere toasty and the rain pouring down. It all happened in 4 separate pulses, each triggered by those monstrous volcanic blasts. There's a spot in a national park not too far away from Sydney, Australia, where a fire has been raging deep underground for at least 6,000 years. They call it Burning Mountain, and it's a coal seam fire, burning its way through a layer of coal beneath the Earth's surface. Once these underground fires start, they're pretty much impossible to put out. This ball of fire is up to 30 feet wide and extremely hot, but there's no flame, it's smoldering. The fire has been creeping along at a pace of about 3 feet per year. A local farmer first spotted it in the 19th century and thought it was a volcano. The people who have lived here for ages believe this place is sacred. They've used it for cooking and crafting tools, and tell that it started from a widow's tears or the torch of a hero. But experts think it could have been a lightning strike or coal heating up like a summer barbecue from the interaction with oxygen. Some say it might have been burning since before the dinosaurs roamed the Earth. No one knows exactly how long this mountain will burn or in what direction it'll move. Right now, the coal has enough oxygen to burn for centuries or even millennia without human intervention. The fire is heating up the mountain like a giant oven, making it crack and crumble, inviting in more oxygen to feed on. Even if humans decide to take action, these coal seam fires need truckloads of water and liquid nitrogen to tame them. Several years ago, explorers noticed that the smolder was creeping close to a cliff overlooking a little river. And depending on what the coal seam decides to do next, we could see some dramatic changes here in the coming decades. There could be flames with much more heat, or the coal seam could go deep, extinguish itself, and smolder out.
We are up for a crazy Atlantic hurricane season. It may be even worse than that of 2005, the year that brought us Hurricane Katrina. That one took 1,392 lives and cost the country over $100 billion. Experts predict there will be between 17 to 25 total named storms. Some of these storms are about to become hurricanes, with winds reaching over 100 miles per hour or higher. We're already seeing storms sweep across the country, bringing dangers like tornadoes, flooding, and hail. You gotta thank the El Niño Southern Oscillation, or ENSO, for this. This complicated term has to do with El Niño and La Niña, the 2 giant forces that basically shape our world. Normally, winds in the Pacific Ocean blow west along the equator, moving warm water from South America towards Asia. This warm water is replaced by cold water rising from the depths of the Pacific. But during El Niño and La Niña, this usual pattern is messed up. El Niño is the warm phase of the Enso cycle. During El Niño, the equatorial winds weaken, causing warm water to shift back towards the west coast of the Americas. This means less cold water rises to the surface. The weather in northern parts of the US and Canada become drier and warmer because of it. But there are wetter conditions in southern states. In the Atlantic, El Niño weakens hurricane seasons, and it ramps up hurricane activity in the central and eastern Pacific. In Africa, it brings more rain to East Africa but less to southern Africa, West Africa, and parts of the Sahara. La Niña is the cold phase of the Enso cycle. During this phase, the westward winds along the equator in the Pacific are stronger than usual, and they push more warm water towards Asia. And because of it, colder, nutrient-rich water rises to the surface along the Americas' west coast. These colder Pacific waters push the jet stream northward, giving us drier weather in the southern US, but wetter and colder conditions in the Pacific Northwest and Canada. La Niña also brings warmer winters to the southern US and cooler than normal temperatures to the north. La Niña usually calms hurricane activity in the Pacific, but intensifies it in the Atlantic. In 2023, El Niño was in charge, and it took most storms up before they got to the US. But this year, we've switched to La Niña, and this lady brings us colder water in the Pacific and a pattern that lets storms move a little farther west and reach the Caribbean. And when they get there, they can easily move into the Gulf and affect Florida and other states. The upcoming intense Atlantic hurricane season also has to do with a strong monsoon season in West Africa. It creates moisture and waves off Africa's coast and can travel along the Atlantic and spur hurricanes. The Atlantic hurricane season runs from the 1st of June to the 30th of November, and most activity happens between mid-August and mid-October. Since the 1950s, tropical cyclones have been given names to make it easier for meteorologists to inform the public about them. You're more likely to remember that Leslie is coming than Hurricane X34D is on the way, right? So there are 20 names on the alphabetical list this year, from Alberto to Beryl to Valerie and William. Let's hope it won't get as terrible as the Galveston hurricane. The most fatal natural disaster in U.S. history hit Texas in the year 1900. A Category 4 hurricane smashed into Galveston, demolishing over 3,600 buildings with winds over 135 miles per hour. It took the lives of between 6,000 and 12,000 people. One of the reasons it became so fatal was poor communication policy. Days before the disaster, it was clear to a professional weather forecaster that the storm was moving west. But the Weather Bureau in Washington predicted it would go over Florida and up to New England, which was way off. The Bureau was just 10 years old then, so hurricane science in the US wasn't very advanced. Cuban scientists were excellent at tracking storms because their region is so prone to them. So they knew it was heading towards the Gulf of Mexico. Unfortunately, the director of the Weather Bureau was so jealous that the Cuban forecasters were better than the American ones that he cut off the flow of information from Cuba and made it difficult for local forecasters to issue warnings without going through Washington. In the days before the storm hit, the chief observer in Galveston began to suspect that Washington's forecast was wrong and tried to warn the city, but it was too late. The hurricane left Galveston in ruins. After this hurricane, the Weather Bureau started improving communication, both internationally and within the U.S. The officials in charge are doing everything possible to improve forecasts, support the people, and help the affected areas recover more easily after the hurricanes hit. They're going to try new forecast models to predict tropical cyclones getting stronger, help emergency and water managers prepare for potential flooding, and protect people and infrastructure. Coastal weather buoys in the tropical western Atlantic and Caribbean have been upgraded, and new drifters and sail drones, Underwater gliders and a lightweight drop sonde will provide real-time data. There are also some things you can do to ensure your safety before, during, and after a hurricane. If you live in a hurricane-prone area, Florida, Georgia, and the Carolinas, you must always be prepared before the high storm season. Make up a family disaster plan that will outline your actions during an emergency. Map out several evacuation routes in case your primary one is blocked, and decide on a meeting place if you get separated. You can arrange drills to teach family members how to shut off water, gas, and electricity, and even make sure the youngest knows how to call emergency services. Pack a disaster kit that will be ready to go at a moment's notice. It should include essentials like food, water, a first aid kit, and flashlights to last at least 72 hours on your own. You can buy a generator to make sure you have electricity in case of a power outage until the power returns. Keep it in a secure place, away from rain and rising water, with proper ventilation. You're also going to need self-powered radios and flashlights. If you can, add a safe room to your house that's strengthened to withstand high winds with reinforced concrete ceiling, floor, and walls. Make sure you have enough canned and non-perishable food and bottled water for at least 3 days. When the storm is about to hit, head north to get away from it, where it will be much weaker by the time it gets there. It's much safer to keep your family and pets together away from the storm than trying to ride it out at home. Try to go in one car if possible. Always follow local evacuation orders, especially if you're in a mobile home. Fill up your gas tank and give yourself plenty of time to get out. Never leave your pets behind. Debris, floodwaters, or flying objects can be dangerous for them. If you're staying put during a storm, you need a safe spot for you, your family, and your pets. This place shouldn't have any windows or skylights. If you're hiding at home, close all interior doors and secure the exterior ones. Quickly find an interior room with strong walls and no windows, like a bathroom or closet. If your home isn't safe, look for a community shelter. Get to your shelter at least 2 hours before the storm hits so it doesn't catch you outside. Bring a battery-powered radio with extra batteries for updates every 15 to 30 minutes. Never leave your shelter even if it seems calm, as conditions can get worse quickly, especially if you're in the eye of the storm. For extra protection, lie on the floor under something sturdy like a table. Don't use electric appliances, phones, or showers during the storm. Don't leave your shelter until you get the official all clear from the authorities. Be careful. There will be many hazards outside.
Rocks rolling down the slopes of a rumbling volcano, pushing other bigger rocks on their way, and eventually tumbling down into the ocean in a humongous cascade, causing a wave the height of which the world's never seen before. This is what might happen if the Helena slump of the Hawaiian Big Island falls off into the water. The Kilauea volcano is far from dormant. The latest eruption occurred in 2018. Its eruptions are usually accompanied by earthquakes of different magnitudes, and with each quake, the magma rocks on the slopes of the volcano shift down. These rock formations are called slumps, and the Helena slump is the most notorious of them all. In 1868, the shift of this slump caused a tidal wave rising as tall as 60 feet. But what's most troubling is that some 110,000 years ago, a landslide here led to one of the most powerful earthquakes ever, which in turn led to a mega tsunami of over 1,000 feet in height. Scientists are worried that such an event may repeat in the future. If that happens, the wave might engulf the whole of Hawaii and easily reach both North and South American coasts. Geologists are quick to reassure, though, that a landslide like this is unlikely to occur anytime soon. It's just too early for that. But when it finally does, the consequences will be catastrophic. Have a nice day! Yellowstone National Park in the western USA is world famous for its dazzling views, and especially the colorful Grand Prismatic Spring at its very heart. But we should all stay aware that Yellowstone is, first and foremost, an enormous caldera, basically a slumbering supervolcano. The difference between a regular volcano, like Kilauea from earlier, and a supervolcano is that the latter is thousands of times more powerful. Imagine an eruption spewing tons of huge rock and rivers of hot lava, pumping out clouds of ash that make countries stop air travel for weeks. And now multiply all of this by 1,000. This is what a Yellowstone eruption would look like. At first, a huge area in the middle of the national park would shake, crumble, and then blast upwards in a megaton explosion. Lava flows and magma rocks would cover the area of about 40 square miles, roughly half of Washington, D.C. But the greatest danger is the volcanic ash. The ashen plume would rise miles above and get carried by the wind in every direction. Since the eruption would be far from ordinary, the spread and damage would also be much greater than usual. The ash is thick and heavy, so it would cover a vast area in a blanket, destroying crops and even buildings. Worse still, it would spread in the air and block out the sun, leading to a drastic drop in temperature and an artificial winter. Even regular volcanoes can lower temperatures worldwide by a few degrees. A supervolcano may potentially cause a new ice age. Luckily, the chances of Yellowstone supervolcano erupting in the near future, or at all, are extremely low. There have been only 3 of those in the history of Earth, and there's no evidence such a disaster should repeat. Scientists estimate the probability at 0.00014%, which is lower than the chances of an asteroid wiping us all out. Speaking of which, if dinosaurs could talk, and were at least still alive for that matter, they'd tell you that asteroid threat is as real as it gets. Scientists at NASA say they've tracked 90% of all near-Earth asteroids of significant size, and none of them are a matter of any concern. But there are still the other 10% in the great unknown. What's more, asteroids can change their line of flight because of the pull of other celestial bodies and eventually turn our way. Lucky us! Now, if an asteroid big enough, like a mile across, hits the Earth, it will first cause an explosion powerful enough to erase a dozen big cities in a matter of seconds. Then the impact will raise a cloud of dust and debris that will block out the sun, just like the ash cloud from a volcano, and cause a centuries-long winter on the whole planet. But even if it falls into the ocean, which is more likely, a resulting wave will rise several miles high, washing coastal cities off the face of the planet. But at least there won't be a new ice age. Although scientists are pretty sure there's no such threat in the near future, it can't be ruled out completely, and humanity needs at least 5 years to prepare for this event. If a big near-Earth asteroid suddenly changes its course and turns right toward our planet, we won't stand a chance against it. Disaster movie, anyone? A much more probable calamity, though, rests right beneath our feet. It's the San Andreas Fault in California. The fault has been ready for rupture for years now, and scientists estimate that an earthquake along this line is likely to occur in the next 3 decades. And when it happens, it won't be nice. They expect a magnitude of 8.0, which is comparable to some of the most devastating quakes in history. It's all the more dangerous since California is home to some of the most populated cities in the western U.S., including Los Angeles and San Francisco. High-rise buildings are common there, and they're particularly vulnerable against underground shakes. The San Andreas earthquake might cause a whole lot of damage both to cities and countryside. In the worst-case scenario, the ground might break apart, destroying buildings, farms, and changing the landscape altogether. Still, scientists believe that the probability of such a quake is only 7% for the next 30 years. So there's a rather big chance, 93%, that we'll never see that in our lifetime. Yet, there's another earthquake hazard not so far away from the previous one: the megathrust in Chile. The country sits right above the subduction zone, an area where 2 tectonic plates meet and go one beneath the other. At the place of their meeting, stress has accumulated because of their continuous movement, and once that strain is too much, a major earthquake occurs. Chile has experienced a lot of quakes in the recent years, and scientists are worried those might be preparing the area for a really big one. They believe a great earthquake is due to happen before the end of the century, and it might be devastating to the coastal area. Even smaller quakes cause tsunamis that flooded the west coast, and a huge one like that is likely to raise a wave of incredible height. On the bright side, Chile now knows to prepare in advance for the coming natural disasters, and geologists are pretty sure people will be able to evacuate before the earthquake strikes. In September of 1859, astronomer Richard Carrington was looking at the sun and suddenly saw a bright flare on its surface. He made a note of it in his records, but only realized how important it was a couple of days later. The energy from that flare reached Earth and struck it directly, causing northern lights to appear above Cuba and burning telegraph lines all around the world. This was dubbed the Carrington event, and it was a solar storm. Such storms hit the Earth fairly often, but none of them were so powerful as the Carrington event, neither before nor after. But in 2012, astronomers registered a similar solar flare whose energy nearly hit our planet once again. If it had been just a week earlier, we'd have been in big trouble. Today, humanity relies on electricity in almost every aspect of life, and a powerful solar storm would mess with the electromagnetic field of Earth a lot. All electric appliances would either shut down or short-circuit, and huge transformers powering basically everything would go out of order for good. It would take years to repair them, and the cost of such a massive blackout would count in trillions of dollars. The worst of it is that science is almost unable to predict solar storms, and even if we could know about them in advance, we'd be powerless to stop them. The flare happens in a matter of seconds, and it takes about 8 minutes for the particles to reach the Earth's atmosphere, causing the disturbance. The power outage would come a bit later, in a day or so, when a massive cloud of plasma gets to our planet. At the moment, there's no protection against solar flares, and the chances of one powerful enough to cut all of our electricity in the next few years are quite high, about 12%. The only good thing about all this is that we now know of such a possibility and can at least prepare in advance. Hey, don't forget to pack some underwear and socks. You'll always need those.
Our planet has known terrible floods, powerful tornadoes, destructive hurricanes. Those dangerous natural disasters are familiar to us. Just picture this. Winds howling through the atmosphere at about 500 miles per hour, and they can stick around for weeks. These insane winds have the potential to damage the ozone layer, making our Earth a hostile place for life. It's not some wild Netflix dystopia. These are real-life hypercanes. A hypercane is a hypothetical extreme tropical cyclone the likes of which we've never known. To kick off a cyclone, the sea surface temps have to hit around 122 degrees Fahrenheit, basically hot enough to sear a rare steak. It's tough to imagine, especially since that's nearly 22 degrees hotter than the highest ocean temperature ever recorded. Yep, the hottest ocean water ever was recorded in Kuwait in July 2020. What could cause such a serious increase in temperature? A powerful comet or asteroid impact, an eruption of a supervolcano, or a large underwater eruption. There's even a theory that a series of hypercanes could have sped up the demise of non-avian dinos after the infamous asteroid impact. An important difference between a hypercane and any present-day hurricane is that a hypercane would rise as far as the upper stratosphere. That's up to 25 to 35 miles over the surface of our planet. Meanwhile, present-day hurricanes only go as high as the lower stratosphere, up to 6 miles above Earth. It would make a dramatic, catastrophic difference, but we'll talk more about it later. Hypercanes could gust to 600 miles per hour. For comparison, the most powerful recorded tropical cyclone in terms of maximum sustained winds was Hurricane Patricia. At its peak, it reached a speed of 215 miles per hour. This speed pales in comparison with that of a hypercane. Can you imagine how much destruction such a natural disaster could cause? Should they ever form, hypercanes will also have an enormous lifespan. They could rage for a couple of weeks, if not more. Extremely low pressure inside hypercanes would support massive storm systems the size of North America. At the same time, hypercanes could be as small as 15 miles across. Such relatively tiny formations would lose their strength in no time after wandering into colder waters. On the other hand, the waters after a hypercane could hypothetically remain hot for weeks, hot enough for more hypercanes to form. Since a hypercane would reach far up into the stratosphere, there would be a real chance it could damage Earth's ozone layer. And it would have devastating consequences for life on our planet. The ozone layer absorbs some of the harmful radiation from the sun, preventing it from reaching the planet's surface. Let's just hope to never see a hypercane in our lifetime. Another potential disaster that could seriously harm Earth could be the activity of our very own sun. I mean, a massive solar flare. Few natural disasters can wreak as much global havoc. A solar flare wouldn't destroy buildings like a tsunami or earthquake. It wouldn't end lives in the same way an asteroid or a supervolcano would. But if the worst comes to the worst, it would destroy the entire electronic infrastructure of our planet. Recovering from the consequences of this catastrophe would cost trillions of dollars. An incredibly powerful solar flare could cause loads of infrastructures to fail, including communication, medicine, banking systems, and transportation. Earth would be left without electricity for a long time, and people wouldn't be able to reboot the already broken power grids. Water supply systems would be out of order. There would be no food in supermarkets. In 1859, people in different parts of the world woke up in the middle of the night because it was so light outside they thought it was already morning. The skies were illuminated with colorful auroras. They showed up even in the regions where no one had seen them before, like the Bahamas, Hawaii, or Jamaica. Telegraphs got electrically charged, even though they were disconnected. Fires started in many regions. In other words, the consequences were already catastrophic, even when technology barely existed. Imagine the avalanche of problems a solar flare could trigger today. Then there are gamma-ray bursts. You can't come across this kind of radiation in your everyday life. A gamma-ray burst occurs when two neutron stars collide when a massive star collapses. Gamma rays could turn into a serious danger to our home planet. If a gamma-ray burst happened close to Earth, it would likely rip our ozone layer away. And you already know how crucial this layer is. Plus, gamma rays could create ground ozone. This kind of ozone could seep into the ocean since it's water-soluble, and that would lead to a mass extinction of marine life and plants. According to some theories, if a gamma-ray burst occurred within around 200 light-years away from Earth and its jets were pointed directly at us, our planet would be vaporized. If the distance was greater, but still in the Milky Way, the resulting radiation would sterilize all life on the side of the Earth pointing towards the burst. Another catastrophe that could potentially destroy our planet might be a super eruption, an eruption of a supervolcano. Yellowstone Park is located on top of one of those. The last massive eruption in that region happened about 664,000 years ago. The next eruption might be due anytime soon. Luckily, at the moment, there's no evidence that the supervolcano is waking up or getting ready for an eruption. But if it did happen, a massive column of lava and ash would shoot up into the air to a height of several miles. The volcano would keep pumping ash for days on end. But the most dangerous consequences of the eruption for all living creatures would be ash fallout. Buildings and trees would collapse under the weight of this dense substance. In just a couple of days, a 10-foot layer of ash would cover the territory of 50 miles around the center of the eruption. After the ash got into the stratosphere, the temperatures would start to drop all over the world. The eruption would most likely be rich in sulfur, an effective sunblocker. So soon it would get so cold that there would be no summer in the entire world for a few following years. It would be hard for animals to find food and clean water. Earth could also encounter a wandering black hole, a region in space where gravity is so powerful that not even light can escape its clutches. At the moment, the nearest to us black hole is around 1,500 light-years away. Seems like there's nothing to worry about. Well, until you find out about wandering black holes. Now things definitely get creepier. If such a black hole entered the solar system, Earth would be doomed. Recently, for the first time ever, astronomers have found a solitary wandering black hole in our home galaxy. This space traveler is 7.1 times as massive as the Sun and is now 5,200 light-years away. Scientists discovered wandering black holes before, but those were in other galaxies. This one is the first to pop up in the Milky Way. Giant sinkholes could also swallow entire communities. For example, when one of such sinkholes opened up in the city of New York in the summer of 2022, it pulled a parked van into the earth. And it wasn't the only sinkhole in that area. Local inhabitants reported around 4,000 sinkholes all over the city between July 2021 and June 2022. This kind of problem is also very common in Florida, and it's much more serious than it may sound. Sinkholes open all of a sudden, pulling down everything and everyone that happens to be nearby. Sinkholes appear all over the world. They're totally unpredictable and form without warning. Luckily, experts know what causes them. In some regions, there are vast areas of groundwater. But during droughts, this water dries up, which creates large, empty caverns. After heavy rains, the surface over such a cavern is likely to collapse, creating a sinkhole within minutes.
Ah, Kiev, you've been dreaming of getting here for years. Getting out your trusty camera, you start taking pictures of the cathedrals, aviation museum, and the Dnipro River, when, without warning, there's an enormous boom behind you. Turning around, you see something towering in the distance. It looks like a gigantic explosion. Uh-oh, time to leave fast. In June 2020, what the people of Kiev were looking at was an anvil cloud, a rare storm formation in the sky. Forming when strong air currents carry water vapor upwards, the air expands and spreads out as it hits the bottom of the stratosphere. It pushes the dense cloud into the cool anvil shape you see, and sometimes it even gets to be a mushroom. Anvil clouds produce some of the most dangerous lightning of all storms, one that's called a bolt out of the blue. This lightning strike seems to magically come out of the blue sky with the storm being many miles away. This type of bolt comes from the top of the anvil and can be 10 times more powerful than a typical lightning strike. People got so frightened after witnessing a giant cloud just 60 miles away, thinking something terrible must have happened. The locals had pictures of the large billow on social media before officials could explain what was going on. Authorities managed to calm everyone's fears by informing them it was nothing more than a natural phenomenon, and a beautiful one at that. Before dissipating, these clouds typically stay in one area, regardless of how strong the wind is. Touring around the northern tip of Queensland, Australia, way away from those creepy crawlies, it's time to take a break and relax at the beach. Getting comfortable, you notice a great big shadow passes over you, then another, and yet another. Looking up, this weird weather is simply stunning. The clouds are called morning glory, a very rare type of cloud that almost seems to roll across the sky, looking like a massive tube. These clouds can measure up to 600 miles long, even appearing in large groups as well. This phenomenon is the result of an updraft pushing through the cloud, creating a rolling appearance, while moist cooler air at the back causes them to sink downward. Southern India between July and September 2001. People witnessed one of the strangest weather phenomenon in recorded history. The rain was red. What many would have thought to be a typical rainstorm left them shocked. The color was bright enough to stain clothes. There were other colors too, such as green, yellow, brown, and even black. In the middle of a monsoon, red rain started to fall, and did so periodically for several weeks. Researchers have found this unusual rain is stained either by dust or algae, so don't try to catch any on your tongue. Scientists aren't entirely sure how the algae got all the way up there. This does make events like this a little unsettling. Like to take a bubble bath to relax after an exhausting day, but taking too long to fill the bathtub? Problem solved. Head to any coastline after a big storm and take a dip. Foamy tides aren't native to any one place or location. They can be formed anywhere in the world. They're most likely to happen along rocky coastlines, like the coast of San Francisco, Northern Ireland, or the Mululaba, Australia. Each coast has differing conditions forming the sea foams. If you scoop up seawater into a glass and look at it closely, you'll see it's full of tiny particles. Many things like plants, chemicals, and lots of salt and minerals create the perfect formula for foam. When powerful currents and wind mix it all together, we get something that resembles a cappuccino top floating on top of the water. When freezing temperatures hit orchards in Michigan, all kinds of unusual things happen, like ghost apples. No, they're not going to scare you at all. But if you plan on sneaking away one winter to find one, be warned. Everything has to be perfect for this to occur, and it's going to be freezing cold. This is actually a rare weather phenomenon caused by having the apples freeze where they are with rain coating the fruit in a thin layer of ice. The apples then thaw and leak out like applesauce, leaving just the beautiful ice shell behind. The Catatumbo River in Venezuela might be the most electric place in the world, with nearly 300 storm days per year. The lightning storms are so consistent, they're predicted for 3 months in advance. During the wet season in October, you might see 30 lightning flashes in a single minute, a truly shocking experience. With each bolt having the energy to power a single light bulb for 6 months, the impressive display could power all of Venezuela forever. At sunset, strong winds flow around the 3 surrounding mountains, forming storm clouds over the water. As the water droplets of humid air collide with ice crystals from the cold air, it produces the static charges that cause the lightning storms nearly every night. If that wasn't bad enough, some storms have lightning above them as well. Try to take a picture of this one. Jellyfish lightning sprites are electrical discharges high in Earth's atmosphere. They're associated with powerful thunderstorms, but they have nothing to do with rain. These sprites occur 30 to 50 miles up in the sky, in the mesosphere. Artificial lights at night make it a lot harder to see this faint lightning. If you spot one, it'll look tiny, but can be well over 30 miles wide. The red sprites are a type of cold plasma discharge above a thundercloud. They're the balance of the lightning charges between the storm clouds and the ground below. Don't try to find this type of donut at your favorite bakery. It won't be there. Snow donuts are one of the rarest meteorological sights to see, with perfect weather conditions needed just to create them. Found in any snow-covered mountain area, like the Rocky Mountains, the wind, temperature, snow, ice, and moisture have to all work together for us to see these phenomenal rings. A thin layer of wet snow on the ground. Under that layer, ice or powdered snow. Then, a strong enough breeze to roll the donut down a hill, just like a snowball. Once it stops rolling, it can be the size of a baseball or as large as a car tire. It all depends on how strong the wind is. A newly formed snow donut won't stay around for very long, so hurry up with that camera. Watching the sunset over the horizon, the beautiful purples and pink overhead are nothing compared to the 3 suns you see in front of you. Wow, since when did Earth get 3 suns? These phantom stars sometimes appearing beside the sun are called sun dogs. Maybe they're called that because they're kind of dogging the actual sun? Sundogs often appear as colored areas of light at the same height above the horizon as the sun. They're mostly observed on a ring or halo, where ice crystals best reflect the light. There are also moon dogs that appear alongside the moon and are formed by lunar light passing through ice crystals, though these aren't seen nearly as much as their daytime partners. Taking photos in the wild, you finally found the perfect spot to take that dream shot. The crystal clear water, the pines, the mountains, and the flying saucer. Wait, a flying saucer? Oh, aliens are here! You might be thinking this if you saw a saucer-shaped cloud. I'm not even going to try to pronounce their name though. Put that on the screen, please. Wait, just kidding. It's altocumulus lenticularis. Aren't you impressed? These are really just unusual cloud formations over mountaintops. When moist air flows over a mountain, a wave is created if the temperature difference is perfect. As the air passes through the wave, evaporation occurs and a series of these clouds may form into an oval shape. Not aliens at all. Whew! The sky is falling! The sky is falling! Well, people who have experienced these clouds say they look like they're coming down from the sky. Mammatus clouds look like giant white lumpy marshmallows, but it might be hard to toast these ones. These weird fluffy clouds can extend hundreds of miles in any direction, remaining visible for short periods at the bottom of anvil or other thunderstorm clouds. The strange bubble shapes are formed from turbulence within the storm itself, creating an uneven cloud base and appearing anywhere in the world. Mammatus clouds form when moist air sinks into dry air. The air must be cooler than its surroundings, cooled with ice, or be heavy with water. Ah, a purple sunset. You must have seen one of those at least once in your life. Normally, it's nothing ominous and has to do with the way light travels. The light that the sun produces is white. When it goes through a prism, you see light waves of different colors, from red and orange to blue, green, and indigo. Light normally travels in a straight line if there's no obstacle in its way. The shorter light waves, including blues and purples, are scattered easier when they meet with those obstacles, like molecules and aerosols in the atmosphere. Because the sun is low on the horizon at sunset and sunrise, its light has to pass through more molecules that scatter the violet and blue light. The colors that your eyes pick up, then, are yellow, orange, and red. But, with the right conditions, you can see the gorgeous purple sky. Sometimes purple sky appears for much scarier reasons. It can be caused by hurricanes, wildfires, or dust storms. The concentration of vapor in the air increases, and the light scatters more than usual. Dust, a setting sun, and low cloud cover all contribute to this natural show, too. The sky turns orange and red at dusk if there's still enough light. Then it gives off pink hues, which mix up with a dark blue sky above. Now, do you remember what happens when you mix pink and blue? You get the color purple. Not every hurricane makes the sky turn purple, and trying to predict if it's going to happen is like trying to forecast a rainbow. Still, people reported several major hurricanes made the skies turn purple. Now, green skies might look just as spectacular as purple ones, but they actually also scream danger. They're usually there to tell you a thunderstorm, hailstorm, or a tornado is somewhere nearby. The unique color is a result of yellow sun rays getting mixed with the blue light coming from storm clouds. So you're enjoying a nice day by the ocean with a fresh breeze in your hair, when suddenly you notice the water starts retreating from the beach at a huge speed. This is a sign for you to start running as fast and far away from the beach as you can. This most likely means that a tsunami is on the way. A quick reaction maximizes your chances of survival. Now, if you notice the sea level is rising, but it doesn't seem too extreme, it could be another sign of an approaching tsunami. It happens in 40% of cases, and the incoming water is the first tsunami wave. The next one, way larger and more dangerous, usually follows in about 10 minutes. Another thing about tsunamis is that they like to arrive with some loud sounds. People describe them as thunder, the sound of a locomotive, a helicopter, or just a loud boom. Do you see a channel of choppy water on the beach? It's in your best interest to stay away from the water. There might be a rip current under the surface that can be extremely dangerous. Sometimes waves hit the shore in a weird way, which forms these rip currents. You might see a strange break in the waves, or an area with a different color than the rest of the water. Random bits of seaweed going in all directions is another rip current warning sign. If you happen to find yourself caught in a rip current, try to stay afloat, but don't try to go against the current. You'll only waste precious energy. Scream for help and try to float your way along the beach. Once you break out of the current, swim diagonally to the shore. The next time you spot conically shaped clouds in the sky, remember it's a good time to start looking for some shelter. If it just stays like that, a severe storm is on the way. But if a cloud of that shape starts spinning around, it means it's about to transform into a tornado. If you have bees nearby, they can save you from big trouble one day. These hard-working little guys get more active than usual when they feel like a storm is on the way. They speed up to collect more nectar before it hits them, and once they're done with it, they'll always come back to the hive 10 to 15 minutes before heavy rain, even when there are no obvious signs of it coming. Their secret is super-sensitive hairs on the back that can pick up electrostatic buildups from storm clouds. For centuries, people have noticed that animals act weirdly a couple of days before big seismic events. Dogs can't stop barking, cows halt their milk, and toads, rats, and snakes leave their homes. It looks like animals can feel smaller initial shock waves that humans don't even notice. Scientists have tried to find some legit explanation for it and run endless tests and experiments. But so far, they're still on their way to explaining this mystery. Can you smell ozone in the air? When a thunderstorm is on the way, it's the most distinct and pungent smell you can pick up. An electrical charge of lightning sets it free from higher altitudes. The other, more pleasant smell of rain is petrichor. Rainwater wakes up molecules on plants, trees, concrete, and asphalt. Their aroma spreads all over the place. You can even feel that smell in your own mouth. All those positive ions in the air that a lightning bolt sets free gets mixed with ozone and your saliva, and that's how you get that bitter metallic taste. When lightning is about to strike, you might hear bizarre crackling, buzzing, or vibrating sounds coming from metal objects nearby. Your palms may begin to sweat, and then you can feel your hair stand on end. That's a clear call for action, and that action is to run for your life. Positive charges are going through your body trying to reach toward the negatively charged part of the storm. Trust me, you don't want these charges to meet. If you see no shelter that you can reach fast, try to make yourself smaller than the objects around you. Drop down your umbrella and stay away from wire fences, metal pipes, rails, and other metallic objects. And don't lie flat on the ground, it's likely wet, which means it's a great conductor of electricity. If you suddenly notice crevices in the asphalt next to your house, it could be a sinkhole warning sign. Inspect your house on the inside. Does that door begin to jam? Or maybe there's a gap where the walls meet the ceiling. Uneven kitchen cabinets and drawers, slanted floors, stairs that begin to slope, water leaking after every rain, and displaced moldings are all signs that a sinkhole is about to open. To find out if it's definitely a sinkhole and how dangerous it is, you gotta consult with an engineering company. If you find a sinkhole that's already there, you gotta stay away from the sinkhole area. Fence or rope it off to make it less dangerous for others. You'll need professional help to fix it. Some volcanoes scream when they're about to erupt. Small earthquakes, which often happen before, produce a hum. It's mostly non-audible to human ears, but sometimes it reaches a frequency that lets you hear it as a strange rumbling or hissing sound coming from the ground. This noise is known as a harmonic tremor. With some volcanoes, it's the sound of magma bubbles vibrating when they're going through crevices in the crust of the Earth. But it's not always like this. If scientists manage to understand what exactly causes these volcanic screams, they could create a limited early warning system for volcanic eruptions. If you're out in the wild, pay attention to the water in creeks, streams, and rivers. If its level is quickly falling, even if it's raining, this might be a sign of a nearing landslide. And if you hear a faint rumbling noise or unusual sounds, like boulders knocking together, it could mean debris is on its way to you. It's a sign to head to safety immediately, like right now. Hey, ever heard of a fire rainbow? Yeah, me neither. How about a circumhorizontal arc? Didn't think so, but just so you know, they're one and the same thing. At first glance, it looks like a painting, or like a rainbow-colored splash in the sky. Despite the name, they have nothing in common with either fire or rain. This phenomenon happens on rare occasions when the sun shines through a particular type of ice cloud formation. The rainbow halos are just as unique. Again, a specific type of ice crystals in clouds needs to be present for the surface of the Earth to bend light from the sun into a perfect ring. The same thing can happen with moonlight. The only difference will be that moon halos are usually white and sun halos can be rainbow-colored. When visiting regions with high altitudes, you may be one of the lucky people to stumble upon penitentes. They're basically naturally formed ice spikes. For them to be formed, they need a really cold and elevated environment where the air is dry. The sunlight turns ice directly into vapor rather than melting it into water. And that's why these blades of snow and ice start to pop up on the surface of the Earth. As cute as they may be, they can end up as tall as 15 feet. Now, what happens when small individual droplets of lava meet the wind? Pele's hair, basically. Let me explain. The word Pele comes from an ancient Hawaiian symbol for volcanoes. Whenever the wind picks up little drops of lava, it stretches them into hair-like strands, similar to the process of glass wire creation. These delicate strands can stretch as far as 6 feet. On rare occasions, it can rain without any clouds. But does it really? Let's look at the science behind this rare phenomenon. It's sometimes called a sun shower, just because it looks like the rain is falling straight from the sun. Let's be clear though, there is no way rain can ever come down directly from a star. Rain clouds are at a bit of a distance from that specific location. With sun rays being angled, the clouds become out of sight. Add a little wind to blow the rain in your direction and ta-da! You get sun showers. Located in Bolivia is a place called Salar de Uyuni. It's the largest salt flat in the world. It's also the home of half of the world's lithium, which is a crucial component for making batteries. But what else is so special about this place? Well, whenever the rain season comes, it turns this piece of flat land into a perfectly reflective mirror lake. What comes to your mind when you hear about the Blood Falls? A horror movie? Well, they are merely a series of waterfalls located in one of the driest regions of Antarctica. They emerge from an underground lake filled with a special kind of bacteria. These little organisms use sulfates as fuel instead of sugars, which makes them very intriguing for scientists. The water contained in this lake is so full of iron that it basically just rusts when it meets the air. Hence, the reddish color of the waterfall, which also gives it its trademark name. Okay, we all know the song, but it's not really made up. There is actually such a thing called a desert rose. It's not a plant though, but a unique form of the mineral gypsum. It develops in dry sandy places that can occasionally flood. This constant switching between a wet and dry environment lets the gypsum crystals emerge between grains of sand, trapping them and forming a rose-like shape. Ever heard of the Eye of Sahara? Scientists are still trying to figure out how it was formed. You can only see it if you fly above it, but it's basically a naturally formed dome that dates back to approximately 100 million years ago. And no, I wasn't around then. It has a rough diameter of 25 miles and consists of a bunch of concentric rings. The biggest one, or the central area, measures about 19 miles in diameter. Astronauts were some of the first people to notice it, and it's been studied ever since. In fact, even to this day, when landing in Florida, they know they're almost home when they see the Eye of Sahara. One of the most beautifully colored trees in the world is located in the Philippines and Indonesia. It's called the rainbow eucalyptus. It got its name because of its bark that switches colors and peels away as the tree ages. The bright green bark is the youngest, as it contains a substance called chlorophyll, usually found in leaves. It then switches to purple and then to the color red. And finally, it turns brown as it grows and loses the chlorophyll. Now, don't be tricked into thinking that's a whole forest. It's one single tree. And no, it's not some sort of optical illusion either. Let me explain. Underneath that soil, there is a complex network of roots that connects around 47,000 tree-like shapes you see above the ground. It's called the quaking aspen. Some of these trees are among the oldest and largest organisms in the world. Now, here's a good destination for all travelers, or maybe not so good after all. The most lightning-stricken area in the world, according to recent data released by NASA, is Lake Maracaibo in Venezuela. Out of all the days in a year, 300 of them feature thunderstorms in this location. What makes this area so unique, though, that storms happen so often? Well, it's because where cool mountain air meets the warm, moist breeze and generates electricity over the lake. The Eternal Flame Falls are located in upstate New York, near the Canadian border. In this region, there is a tiny waterfall with a big secret, a spark about 8 inches tall. Turns out there's a natural gas seep that provides fuel to the flame behind the waterfall. The waterfall provides enough coverage so that it stays lit pretty much every time. Hikers do enjoy to relight it if they see that it's been blown out. This phenomenon is actually quite common, but this one gained more popularity because it is younger than most. And it looks very good in pictures, let's be honest. I've heard of yellow sand, white sand, and even black sand here or there. But I've never heard of green beaches until now. Papacolia, also known as Green Sand Beach, is located in Hawaii and is one of the few beaches in the world that features green sand. The unique coloring comes from olivine rock that was formed when a nearby volcano erupted. Actually, in Hawaii, all the volcanoes are nearby. Move over green sands because some of the other beaches around the world can even glow at night, and it's completely natural. The culprit? A little thing called photoplankton, or microalgae as they're sometimes called. They're basically little plants that contain chlorophyll and need sunlight in order to live and grow. Most photoplankton kinds are able to float in the upper part of the ocean, where the sunlight can still reach them beneath the water. When the photoplankton gets agitated by the movement of waves and currents, they emit light, which looks like some glow during the night. These special microorganisms are found on beaches in a lot of places around the world, such as the Maldives, Puerto Rico, and the Everglades. At the base of a mountain located just outside of Afton, Wyoming, is a little river called the Intermittent Spring. There are only 3 of this kind in the whole world, but what makes this little string of water so mysterious? Well, the fact that it starts and stops every few minutes. Scientists have yet to pinpoint precisely why this happens. They speculate that it's basically just a siphon effect that happens deep within the ground that causes the river to just start and stop so often. Should you ever be interested in checking it out, be sure to do so in the late summer, as that's when the intermittent spring is most active. Do you see the irony here? You can only see the spring in the summer? Okay, I'm done.
You feel some rumbling from below. No, it's not your tummy. It's low and ominous. You look up and see strange lights hanging above the ground. They look like shimmering balls of light hovering high up in the sky. Your throat goes dry and you gulp. That's what they call the earthquake lights. This phenomenon is poorly understood, but witnesses say they've seen it in different shapes and sizes. It could be in the form of light balls, sheet lightning, streamers, and a steady glow in the sky. Soon after, a strong earthquake follows. Scientists can't explain why those lights appear, and they don't always do either. Some believe that's a reaction of underground gases released into the atmosphere. Sure enough, an earthquake begins. But lucky you, it's not as strong as you expected. The ground is shaking, but you even manage to keep your balance. It stops as abruptly as it began, and you walk home. On the way home, you see a flash and hear a whip crack. Lightning has struck a lone tree near where you just stood. It's caught on fire, and there's a column of flames rising to the sky. Still no rain, and the pillar becomes taller and taller. Have you heard of such a thing as a fire tornado? These phenomena occur when the wind is caught in a circle close to the ground because of the difference in air pressure. Such mini tornadoes are usually easy to notice. Small rubble, dust, sand, and leaves rise into the air and start flying in rapid circles. But then, if there's a source of fire nearby, the funnel can catch it and blow it stronger, like bellows. The flames go round and round, reaching ever higher and eventually creating a swirling, blazing tower. Luckily, fire tornadoes are short-lived and don't normally cause much damage. But don't try to hide from the storm under that tree. You can find this unusual plant in Florida and in some parts of the Caribbean coast. Externally, it doesn't look special at all. A gray trunk, green leaves, and fruit similar to small apples. What you must remember is never to pluck these apples and never stand next to the tree, especially if it's raining. This is the manchineel tree, which is considered the most dangerous in the world. Its trunk, bark, branches, and fruit contain poisonous juice. One drop of this corrosive acidic liquid can harm your skin a lot. The tree can secrete this juice, and if you accidentally touch it, you risk burning your hand. When it rains, water droplets fall on the tree and mix with the poison. Water can also bounce off the bark and get on your skin. That's why you shouldn't stand nearby either. There are almost no other shrubs or mushrooms growing around. Animals avoid these trees, and people don't chop them and don't pluck the fruit. You can't make a bonfire from their branches. Burning wood emits poisonous smoke that can damage your eyes. Locals know this tree well, but tourists and travelers might accidentally get harmed. That's why most manchineel trees are marked with paint or have a warning sign. In western Venezuela, locals living close to the Catatumbo River aren't afraid of lightning because they see it almost every single night. It starts at around 7 o'clock and doesn't stop until dawn. The everlasting Catatumbo lightning did once stop for a few months, from January to March 2010. It was probably due to drought, or maybe the charge ran out. In 1991, a scientist suggested that the phenomenon happens because of cold and warm air currents meeting in the area. Another theory is that the lightning could be due to the presence of uranium in the bedrock. Not all lightning happens inside clouds. There's a rare phenomenon called a dirty thunderstorm. The lightning happens above a volcano. The most famous is in Japan. It erupts almost every day and spits black clouds high into the air. So it's super scary volcano clouds plus lightning. Whoa! Regular lightning happens during a storm when ice crystals bump into each other. In a dirty thunderstorm, bits of volcanic ash collide, create friction, and spark up the sky. In the hottest and one of the driest places on Earth, Africa's Danakil Desert, temperatures often rise above 120 degrees Fahrenheit. The out-of-this-world landscape has many active volcanoes and geysers that spit out toxic gases like chlorine and sulfur. The vibrantly green, electric blue, and yellow waters are all rain and seawater warmed up by magma. One wrong step here, and you'd be gone for good. This happened in June 2009. People in certain areas in Japan left their homes after a heavy downpour, only to find fish, frogs, and tadpoles everywhere. Fields, roads, lawns, and rooftops were littered with these aquatic creatures. One man was shocked to see 13 carp on and around his truck. Apparently, he stopped to count them. No one knows for sure where the bizarre rain came from, but the most popular theory claims that a powerful water spout picked up all these creatures. Then it carried them through the upper atmosphere and dropped the animals on the unsuspecting people below. And now, welcome to Abraham Lake in Canada. It's completely frozen. You step onto the transparent ice and look down at what lies beneath. No fish, just some mysterious frozen bubbles. They look like small clouds frozen in ice, or jellyfish who forgot to pack a winter jacket. There are thousands of these little bubbles made up of methane. But don't try to dig a hole in the ice to touch it. Methane is highly flammable. It's created by methane-producing bacteria that eats leaves, grass, insects, or any other organic stuff that gets into the lake. When the methane touches the frozen water, it turns into tens of thousands of frozen little balls. When the ice melts, they burst open and sizzle. Similar lakes can be found near some shores of the Arctic Ocean. There, the size of the bubbles can reach several times the size of hot air balloons. Beautiful for sure, but not exactly safe. The next shocking lake is in Indonesia, the island of Java. you come to a majestic volcano, overgrown with grass and trees. The volcano seems to be asleep, but smoke is pouring out of it. You climb to the summit. Exhausted, tired, sweaty, you're ready to cool off. Nice work, you made it to the top. You look into the mouth of the volcano. No boiling lava, just a beautiful, bright, turquoise lake down there. It looks like an oasis. Perfect time for a refreshing dip. You run down and get ready to jump in. But that's not water, that's acid! Sulfurous gases get into the lake from under the volcano. The lake itself is full of metals. When the gases touch them, they form that beautiful turquoise water. Acid. Better head back to the nearest village, rest, and come back at night when it's cooler. In the dark, the lake seems to glow. Right above it, you see light-filled, exploding little clouds. The sulfurous gases rise out of the lake, combine with the air, and flash bright blue. Still, don't get too close. The sea turns sinister red, and no living being can survive in it. Must be some dark magic. In fact, it's tiny algae that spread uncontrollably, giving the water this specific tint called the red tide. They have toxins that destroy sea mammals, birds, and turtles, as well as creatures that feed on them. For humans, contact with it ends in breathing problems or seafood poisoning. Sometimes even huge ships sink in the open seas for no visible reason. That reason is often the pockets of bubbles that underwater volcanoes produce even while they're sleeping. Those productive magma factories are hidden under 8,500 feet of water. When they wake up, they act just like land volcanoes, and they can cause destructive tsunamis. This tree looks like a bottle. No wonder it's called the bottle tree. It grows in Namibia and attracts many tourists. But don't get too close to the tree because it's one of the most dangerous on Earth. Milky juice flows inside the trunk. It's highly toxic to the human body. On the bright side though, the trees have beautiful pink-white leaves with a red core. There's a tree growing in Western Australia that was once used as a prison. A cell for criminals existed inside the Boab prison tree for a long time. People were usually kept there temporarily, just for one night. After that, they were taken to their final destination. The prison was built more than 1,500 years ago and has been perfectly preserved to this day. Tourists visiting this place can sneak a peek inside.
When we think of active volcanoes, one region comes to mind: the Ring of Fire in the Pacific Ocean. 3/4 of Earth's volcanoes sit within this belt. Compare the area to Australia, which doesn't have any volcanic activity. The old continent of Europe is also calm, or at least we like to think so. Can you guess what the most active volcano in Europe is? If you thought of Mount Etna on the island of Sicily in Italy, you were right. The volcano has erupted about 200 times and has been far from sleeping in recent decades. The last time this happened was in August 2023. The highest mountain in the Mediterranean is 500 million years old. But in Iceland, there is a much younger volcano. It sprang into action on the 10th of July 2023. In the afternoon, 3 fissures appeared in the ground on a peninsula in the southwest of the island. This was at a base of a small mountain peak. Its name means Little Ram in the local language. The volcano spewed molten lava high into the air. There were also gas plumes in the area. But the scientific community wasn't surprised by the event. They already knew about the volcanic area that stretches between the cities of Reykjavik and Keflavik. Its name is hard to pronounce. Hey, I want to buy a vowel. It had already erupted during the previous 2 summers. This activity came after 8 centuries of dormancy. In the days leading up to the latest eruption, seismologists, the scientists who study earthquakes, recorded over 12,000 tremors. When the ground opened up in July, the fissures were over 1.5 miles long. The following morning, 2 of them closed. All the lava was now coming out of the last fissure. It grew into an elongated cone, the simplest shape of volcano we are all familiar with. The lava soon filled a large crater. It grew almost 100 feet tall during the first week, and it is still growing. On the night when the eruption started, lava spread out in all directions. Its cinders set ablaze the dry moss in the vicinity. Local authorities closed off the surrounding area. There were toxic gases from the volcanoes and smoke from the burning moss. Firefighters flocked to the area. After a week, they proclaimed the area safe. Visitors soon came to witness the birth of Europe's youngest volcano. This form of tourism is quite developed in Iceland. People come from all over the world to watch active volcanoes. The land of fire and ice is home to more than 130 volcanoes. Some 30 of them are active. Now, I know what you're thinking right now. Is volcano tourism safe? In Iceland, it is. The country's authorities research and constantly monitor all of the hotspots. The island is dotted with several dozen seismic stations. These help researchers accurately predict future eruptions, and emergency services are accustomed to these sorts of events. They can quickly cordon off danger zones. This is what happened in 2010. A volcano in the south of the island, the name of which everyone struggled to pronounce, erupted. It spewed out a plume of steam and ash that was 7 miles high. This wasn't a fun time to be an air traveler. Winds carried the enormous plume southeast toward northern Europe. Many countries closed their airspace for several days for safety reasons. The volcano erupted in March, but the Earth was shaking from January the same year, so seismologists knew that an eruption was approaching. When it comes to the continent's youngest volcano, the tourist infrastructure is already there. Visitors can leave their cars at a designated parking lot. Then they go on a 5-hour-long trek. This leads to a viewing deck. Tourists are so close to the epicenter that they can feel the heat haze from the crater. The sight is the most impressive at nighttime. Safety is never a concern. Scientists regularly chart out hazard maps that outline the borders of lava fields. This way, visitors who stick by the rules are never in harm's way. More than a week after the eruption started, a section of the crater collapsed. Lava flowed downhill west of the volcano. This majestic smoldering hot river is slow-moving lava. Scientists categorize it as an AA type. The term is Hawaiian. It describes basaltic lava that has a rough and brittle surface. The flow is composed of broken lava blocks that are called clinkers. They fall off as the substance flows. This reveals red-hot areas. The cooler sections of lava are gray and black in color. When it moves forward, it produces a distinctive sound like shattering glass. Nearly a month after the eruption of the new volcano, we got aerial footage of an interesting phenomenon. A tornado formed directly over the lava flow. This occurs due to the high temperatures in the area. When the conditions are right, a column of heated air can easily turn into a mini tornado. Scientists observed a similar event happen during the 2018 eruption of Mount Kilauea in Hawaii. The lava fields of Europe's second-largest island tell the story of the creation of Iceland. It sits above the place where the North American and Eurasian plates meet each other. Tectonic plates are huge, rocky chunks of Earth's most outer layer. There are roughly 20 of them. They rest on a partially molten layer of rock. All the lava we see on the surface starts its journey here. You could say that these plates float on molten rock. Their boundaries are unstable, so when two plates grind past each other, they release tremendous amounts of energy. The formation of volcanoes is one result. These are places where the molten rock travels upward to the surface. Iceland began to form some 60 million years ago. The tectonic plates under the ocean drifted apart. Enough lava piled up on the surface to create solid ground. This ancient rock is under the waves today. As new lava reaches the surface and cools down, it pushes the old rock away from the center of the island. That's why the oldest parts of Iceland aren't 60, but only 16 million years old. The country's active lava fields are young in geological terms. Some of them are under 1,000 years old. Scientists consider the island a hot spot for volcanoes, pun intended. Nearly a third of the basaltic lava that reaches the Earth's surface in recorded history came from Icelandic eruptions. Fissure swarms, like the ones before the 2023 eruption, cover 30% of the Nordic country. For this reason, only a quarter of the island is inhabited. Norse Vikings were the first people to settle in Iceland at the beginning of the 10th century. Nature threw them a loud welcoming party. Just a few years after their arrival, they witnessed one of the greatest volcanic eruptions in history. Vikings came from a region without volcanoes, so they had no clue as to what was going on. Today, Icelanders are used to such events. This is good because their homeland is entering a new era of volcanic activity. Volcanologists suspect that recent events are an introduction to decades of more frequent eruptions. The peninsula that is home to Earth's youngest volcano is just 17 miles southwest of Iceland's capital city. It's been dormant for a long time. Present-day eruptions there are a reminder that the natural processes that created Iceland are still ongoing. Recently, scientists discovered that there's a historical link between volcanic eruptions in the north of Europe and glaciers. Our planet went through at least 5 major ice ages. These were exceptionally lengthy periods when the average temperature on Earth dropped. The result was the expansion of ice sheets across northern Europe and North America. The last ice age ended some 10,000 years ago. Researchers are still trying to fully understand how these glacial periods affected volcanic activity. They suspect that the sheer weight of all that ice disrupts the flow of magma underground. When glaciers retreat, the pressure is lifted. This makes it easier for lava to flow upward to the surface where it bursts. So get this. Taylor Swift takes a flight from Los Angeles to Tokyo that leaves at 10 a.m. on February 20th. She's on the plane for 12 hours, but she lands only at 2 p.m. the next day in Tokyo. That's a 28-hour difference. So, how did this time warp happen? Well, it's all because of this wonky line. This is the International Date Line. You know, that imaginary line that slices the globe in half and decides who gets to celebrate the new year first? It's the Line Islands, by the way. But crossing this line doesn't just make you feel like you've stepped into a transporter. It actually changes your day. Cross from east to west and boom, it's 24 hours later. If you travel in the opposite direction, crossing the line from the western side to the eastern side, you go back an entire calendar day. Now, you'd think that the International Date Line would be a nice, neat, straight line in the ocean where the time zones switch. But in reality, it's as if someone took a ruler and said, let's make this complicated. The line zigzags all over the place, wrapping around islands and causing all sorts of head-scratching confusion. For instance, Big Diomede Island and Little Diomede Island are only 2.5 miles apart, but have a 21-hour time difference. And things can get a little more complicated depending on which time zone a country follows. For example, if you travel 659 miles across the date line from Baker Island to Tokelau, you must add 25 hours. In other words, that's 1 day and 1 hour. And if that doesn't sound weird enough for you, wait, it gets crazier. When it's 6 o'clock in the morning on Thursday in New York, it's still Wednesday night in American Samoa. Meanwhile, over in Kiribati, it's already Friday. Yep, we're talking about 3 different calendar days happening at the same time because of this one imaginary crazy line. This phenomenon occurs every day between 10 o'clock and 10:59 in the morning. So, why does the International Date Line look so ridiculous in the first place? Well, great question. Although these zigzags may seem completely arbitrary, they actually have a logical basis. It's pretty much a made-up concept based on the Earth's rotation. The Earth is always spinning, thank goodness, and it takes about 24 hours, or a day, to complete one full rotation. To keep things in sync, people took the Earth and divided it into 24 time zones, each 15 degrees apart. But what is the starting point for a day on Earth? Well, basically, people needed to figure out which of these 24 zones or lines would be the starting line, or the chronocenter. They needed a reference point, a line where they could begin adding or subtracting time as you move east or west. That line is what we now call the prime meridian. But here's the catch. Deciding where to put this starting line, the prime meridian, is totally arbitrary. The idea of establishing a line where days begin and end goes all the way back to at least the 1300s. Back then, map makers were doing their own thing, picking their own east-west dividing lines called meridians, which, by the way, is just a fancy Latin word for midday. Without a universal standard for when a day officially started or ended, sailors on long voyages just had to wing it, figuring out how to handle the time they were gaining or losing along the way. So, in 1884, people decided to organize this whole mess. 25 nations gathered at the prestigious International Meridian Conference in the United States with one big goal: to decide on a line that would serve as the official prime meridian. Finally, like it or not, they were determined to create the international dateline that the whole world would accept and would follow from that point forward. The prime meridian was established in Greenwich, England, and the international dateline was placed on the opposite side, running through the 180th meridian. Well, sounds simple, right? But that's when the nightmare really began. The chosen international dateline didn't just wander through uninhabited areas. Oh no! It split some countries in half and created all sorts of chaos. I mean, if you divide the world with a completely straight vertical line, you end up with situations where half of a country is one day ahead and the other half is one day behind. Take Kiribati, for example. The country is primarily centered in the Gilbert Islands, which sits just west of the international dateline. However, in 1979, their territory got a little bigger with the Phoenix and Line Islands, which are way east of the dateline. Suddenly, Kiribati was straddling the international dateline. This created a bit of a headache for businesses. Folks on either side could only communicate by radio or phone for 4 weekdays a week. Now, to fix this quirky situation, Kiribati decided to skip Saturday, December 31st, 1994, right off the calendar. So Friday, December 30th, turned into Sunday, January 1st, 1995. And just like that, New Year's Day came a day early. Woohoo! After that, the dateline moved eastward to go around the entire country. So the same thing that happened to Kiribati happened to other countries as well. For example, when they got to the Aleutian Islands in Alaska, the line made another detour to include them. And when they got south of the equator, well, guess what? Another eastward bend to cover even more islands. And that's pretty much why the straight line started to get a bit ziggy-zaggy. This wonky line is designed to avoid land as much as possible, so there's less hassle when it comes to changing days. So, no, you can't stand between the international dateline, like having one foot in one day and the other in the next. But you can cross it by boat. In fact, some fancy trans-Pacific cruises even offer a time travel package for adventurous travelers who want to cross the line and jump into the future. Now, in the end, the international dateline looks this ridiculous because it was constructed based on a series of arbitrary decisions, historical quirks, and a whole lot of confusion. But it's not just because people organized it in the 19th century that there is no confusion regarding time zones today. Another thing that the prime meridian establishes is Coordinated Universal Time, the famous UTC. Now, UTC never changes for daylight savings time or anything else. However, in 1908, Canada decided to spice things up by creating Daylight Saving Time, or DST. Their idea was to set the clocks 1 hour ahead of standard time to make better use of sunlight in the spring and summer and fall evenings. The idea was so brilliant that most countries jumped on board, but not everyone. Just look at Nepal. They have never ever used the daylight savings time, which means their clocks do not change throughout the entire year. As you probably know, countries with large territories often have more than one time zone. Just like the United States, which has 11 time zones. Australia has 9, while India is a special case. Look, India is a big country with an area that stretches around 1,800 miles from west to east. So it should have 3 time zones in total, but they only have one. This means that the sun rises almost 90 minutes earlier in Dong in the far east than in Gujarmoti in the west. And why do they have only one time zone? Well, basically, because they can. Just remember that the international dateline and time zones are invisible, artificial, and now you know, totally arbitrary. So if a country wants to stick with just one time zone to simplify processes and business operations within its border, then hey, why not? It's been there for over 3 billion years, but now some of the Earth's oldest crust is falling apart. Today, our continents seem stuck in place, but over a long time, they've moved and shifted around a lot. It's all thanks to tectonic activity, which makes part of Earth's surface slowly slide around like pieces of a giant puzzle. Some of the most stable parts of these puzzle pieces are called cratons. Cratons are super old and strong sections of rock that form the roots of continents and keep them together. The North American craton is one of them. It makes up a big part of the United States, about half of Canada, and most of Greenland. Scientists have singled out about 35 of these big ancient cratons around the world. They've mostly stayed in the same place for hundreds of millions of years because of how strong they are. But in 2014, they discovered that cratons might not be as indestructible as they thought. Some cratons had lost parts of their strong roots because of certain geologic processes and became thinner. It looks like cratons could become less stable if they go through more tectonic changes. In 2024, scientists at China University of Geosciences analyzed an ancient landmass called the North China Craton, or NCC for short. They wanted to learn more about how some of Earth's oldest rock regions can break apart. This process of cratons disintegrating is called decratonization. The NCC is so interesting to study because it has three main parts: the Western Block, the Eastern Block, and the Trans-North China Orogen, a zone that lies between the two blocks. Scientists found that during the Mesozoic era, the Eastern Block lost its deep ancient roots because of the strong Earth movements called tectonomagmatic events. So scientists wanted to see exactly how the processes in the mantle and the movements of Earth's plates led to the breaking down of the NCC. They created 4D models showing how the NCC's shape changed over time, including its surface shape, how its layers stretched, and the way earthquake waves moved through it. They found that a section of the tectonic plate slid beneath the craton and then began to roll back. This rolling and stretching made the strong rock thin out and eventually lose stability. All this started around 200 million years ago, back during the Jurassic period, when dinosaurs were rocking the world. The North China Craton isn't the only place where this decratonization process can happen. Other cratons, like those in North America, South America, and China's Yangtze region, may have gone through similar changes. Scientists say this shows how the continents on Earth have slowly changed and evolved over billions of years. And it looks like, when it comes to geology, there's no place that is 100% safe from changes, but it's no cause for alarm. You don't notice this, but our planet never stops moving and is perfectly normal. But sometimes, this movement still brings dramatic changes. In 2017, scientists made an official announcement that Zealandia can be called a new continent. The continental shelves of this mysterious continent are lying at a depth of around 3,280 feet below sea level. The nearest oceanic crust dives even deeper, at 9,800 feet below that. Geologists have gone deep down to collect rocks from the ocean floor. They have found that, unlike the nearby oceanic crust, which is made up of fresh basaltic rocks, the crust around New Zealand is a mix of ancient granite, limestone, and sandstone. All this screams continental crust. Plus, scientists have discovered a narrow strip of oceanic crust that separates Australia from the hidden land of Zealandia. It means these two are separate continents. 85 million years ago, Zealandia decided to break free from the supercontinent Gondwana. Millions of years later, the mighty Pacific Plate, the heavyweight champion of tectonic plates, decided to take a dive beneath Zealandia's continental crust. And that's how the root of Zealandia, that connection to its continental crust, broke off and went into the depths below. And that's not all the tectonic news from this part of the world. 120 million years ago, Australia and Antarctica were a single piece of land. They went their separate ways, but Antarctica didn't leave empty-handed. Today, there's an oceanic plateau in the Indian Ocean. Long ago, it was connected to another lost continent, the Kerguelen microcontinent. Scientists believe that it made a land bridge between India and Antarctica. To find out what it was like, we can look at a tiny archipelago in the southern Indian Ocean. These islands are all that is left of the ancient landmass. They have a cold climate and feature glaciers because they're so close to Antarctica. But in the past, the weather here must have been temperate with plenty of rainfall. The animals and plants would have been similar to those that live in tropical regions today. Another lost and found continent isn't hiding in the ocean, but under Europe. It's called Greater Adria, and it collided with Europe and started to sink under it around 100 million years ago. Today it lies beneath Italy, Greece, and the Balkans. Its size and even shape match that of Greenland, the world's largest island. Greater Adria is no longer visible, but it left some clues. Part of it was embedded in the Alps. The other chunks are part of present-day Italy and Croatia, on the other side of the Adriatic Sea. Limestone rocks from the former continent started to change once they were under the European landmass. Great heat and pressure spread over tens of millions of years changed their structure. And that's when the limestone left the chat, and the marble took its place. Greater Adria wasn't a solid piece of land like the big continent we see today, but more like a giant shallow shelf underwater. Over time, sand, mud, and other stuff settled on this shelf and slowly turned into rock. Greater Adria might have been a little like Zealandia or the Florida Keys, a chain of small islands sitting in a shallow sea. Above the water, there were probably lots of little islands and archipelagos, and beneath the waves, there were colorful coral reefs filled with marine life. If you lived back then and had a scuba tank, it would have been an amazing place to dive and explore. So, with all the things going on with the cratons, who knows? We could see a new continent in the future. Plus, studying the Earth's crust even deeper can change history as we know it. Scientists in Copenhagen have made an amazing discovery about the real birthplace of Scandinavia, and it's not where we thought. After studying sand and rock from remote parts of Finland, they found out that Scandinavia's roots actually came from Greenland over 3.75 billion years ago. This means the area where Nordic countries are now is 250 million years older than the scientists had previously believed. And we now know, thanks to the tiny crystals called zircons found in Finnish river sands. When scientists looked closely at their chemical makeup, they realized the age of crystals matched the rocks found in Greenland, not Scandinavia. They used special techniques to analyze elements like uranium, lead, lutetium, and hafnium, and discovered that Scandinavia's rocky base most likely broke off from Greenland billions of years ago. A small seed of land probably started drifting across the Earth's surface over hundreds of millions of years. This piece eventually settled where Finland is today. Over time, new layers of rock formed around this seed and slowly turned into the Scandinavia we see on maps now. The same study could help us rethink how the continents on Earth first formed. The most accepted theory is that the continental crust began growing right when the planet was formed. But new studies show that the signs of continents only started growing a billion years later. The scientists explain that Earth's continents may have begun as tiny seeds of ancient crust in different places. These seeds grew over time, forming the landmasses we know today. These ancient seeds aren't just found in Scandinavia, but also in Australia, South Africa, and India. Scientists aren't sure if all these seeds came from the same place or if they grew separately in different parts of the world. So there's still a lot to learn, and scientists need to keep digging to figure out if all these ancient seeds are related to each other.
On September 16th of 2023, without warning, the Earth began to hum. A low, strange vibration reverberated through the crust. This set off seismic alarms all across the globe. For 9 days straight, the planet was pulsing with this horrifying rhythm, and scientists had no idea what was going on. Meanwhile, the total disaster was happening in Greenland. It wasn't an earthquake. They knew that much. They could tell it by the rhythm. Since we all live on giant tectonic plates, they constantly move and slide on magma like icebergs on water. Sometimes as they move, they can rub against each other or collide or break. In any case, all this causes an incredible release of energy that sends shock waves through the ground. That's when we feel the ground literally shaking, and it's what we call an earthquake. These vibrations we feel are called seismic waves. Seismometers pick them up as pings or rumbles. In a typical earthquake, they create a bunch of different frequencies. It's a crazy chaotic mix of low and high frequencies, like smashing every piano key. What was weird about the Greenland event is that the signals weren't like that at all. It was a steady, single-frequency vibration, as if some ancient machine was stirring beneath the earth. It's like one piano key being struck over and over, creating a doom-like, repetitive sound. Turns out, what they were hearing wasn't the noise of tectonic plates going wild. It was a phenomenon seismologists had never seen before. The days passed, and the mysterious noise just kept going. The vibrations repeated every 90 seconds, echoing around the world. The hunt for answers was growing more desperate. Seismologists had no idea what they were dealing with. They had to gather a huge international team of 68 people from 15 countries. All these scientists were gathering seismic data, satellite images, and doing some advanced math for several days, until they finally realized who the culprit was. Water. It all happened in a remote, desolate region of East Greenland. This place is full of fjords, narrow inlets of the sea between high cliffs, kinda like deep water-filled valleys surrounded by towering rocky sides. In this area, surrounded by jagged peaks and icy waters, the air was still. The landscape seemingly frozen in time. Nothing here changed much for years. Until one day, a colossal landslide has unfolded in the Dixon Fjord. One of those steep mountainsides towering over the fjord at almost 4,000 feet high collapsed in a massive landslide. Picture a huge chunk of this mountain crumbling and crashing down into the fjord below. This sent a deluge of rock and ice crashing into the water. The impact was just apocalyptic. 882 million cubic feet of debris. That's enough ice and rock to fill 10,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools, or 10 Great Pyramids of Giza. And all this nightmare hurled into the water with such force that it kick-started a tsunami about 360 feet high, taller than the Statue of Liberty, into the air. What's crazy is that this incredibly powerful wave was trapped in the fjord by narrow cliffs, unable to escape. It's like water sloshing in a closed bathtub. For 9 days, the mega tsunami continued to churn through it. That's why we heard this endless hum. It was a rhythmic back and forth of the water slamming against the walls. The shock waves were rippling deep into Earth's crust, vibrations so strong that they were picked up by seismometers around the globe. This was a phenomenon so rare, so unprecedented, that it left scientists stunned. It turned out to be a perfect storm of elements. A glacier, weakened by years of warming, could no longer bear the weight of the mountain above. This collapse was inevitable, and the chaos literally shook the Earth to its core. And people often hang out in this area with cruise ships passing by. We're lucky that no lives were lost in the disaster. It was a close call though. A tourist ship stranded in the area just 2 days before narrowly escaped the tsunami's reach by pure luck. But it doesn't mean there were no losses. The waves destroyed a nearby Inuit site, which was there untouched for over 200 years. They also swept away the huts at a research station that were about 43 miles away. The vibrations traveled from Greenland to the South Pole in less than an hour. That just shows how dangerous events like this can be. And this isn't the only place where such catastrophes are happening. In the beautiful California community of Rancho Palos Verdes, the ground is shifting so quickly that it's tearing homes apart. The land there has always been kinda unstable. It has some unique geology. It's built on soft, clay-rich soil and sits on a geological fault line, which makes it prone to landslides. This means that this land is prone to slow, natural shifting over many years, even when no crazy weather is happening. It's been like this for decades, but usually it's slow and pretty manageable, like about a foot a year. Imagine a tree that you played with as a kid moving 20 feet to the left as you grow up. For decades, residents adapted. They built their homes on adjustable beams. This helped the houses to move with the land. And that strategy worked well, until now. Recently, things have been getting much worse in the community. Now, the land is moving by a foot in a single week. That would be like if the same tree moved almost 960 feet since you were a child. The past 2 years have also caused some heavy rains, and the weather has been getting worse. This increased water content in the soil. The land became heavier and more prone to rapid movement. Now, this once idyllic seaside escape turned into a disaster zone. Cracks have appeared in closets, gardens, and roads, growing larger with each passing day. Streets that were once smooth are now buckled and twisted, with roads turning into a crazy theme park. Houses that once stood firm are being ripped from their foundations, some of them split in half. One of the houses had its front door 8 feet off the ground. Entire neighborhoods have been plunged into chaos. Utility companies had to switch off gas and electricity indefinitely to prevent potential disasters. The hardest hit is the coastal neighborhood of Portuguese Bend, where residents are living on the edge. Literally. It always had amazing ocean views and cool sea breezes, with horses and peacocks still wandering the tree-lined streets. But now, it's like an earthquake hit. Only this time, the earth isn't stopping. For many, this place feels like paradise, if only the land would stop shifting beneath their feet. So the locals don't give up. Some of them had to leave, but many are determined to stay and fight, despite the destruction. But they still have to pour in hundreds of thousands of dollars to save their properties. People have installed generators to keep the lights on and set up sewer systems and pumps to drain the groundwater causing the landslides. Some say that the only way for these neighborhoods to survive might be to go completely off-grid, installing power walls to store energy and stuff like that. People are trying their best to run the sewer system off generators. They hope that they could get rid of this water in the soil that's causing these hellish landslides in the first place. They're determined to fight, but they will need help and support from the government to fight this disaster. Landslides are actually more common across the US than many might think. And new maps and data show that tons of people in the country might be in danger. Scientists managed to create the first very detailed, very cool map that shows where these landslides might happen, county by county. It's based on a lot of data and the history of 1 million previous landslides. They say that nearly 40% of the United States is at risk of experiencing landslide activity, which could lead to some insane catastrophes in certain areas. Luckily, now both residents and engineers can keep this in mind. But all this shows